You've been chasing happiness your whole life. They told you it was out there, waiting at the next promotion, the next relationship, the next achievement. They told you once you got there, you'd finally feel whole. But here's the secret no one wants to admit. Every time you reach the finish line, it moves. Every win feels good for a moment, then slips through your fingers like sand, and you're left restless, tired, asking, why am I never enough? The truth is, happiness was never hiding out there. It was never something to run after, never something anyone else could give you. It lives quietly inside you, underneath the noise, underneath the constant chase. And Buddhism, an ancient path walked by millions before you, holds the key to uncovering it. Not through magic, not through escape, but through peace so steady it cannot be shaken. Imagine waking up tomorrow without that endless pressure in your chest. Imagine walking through the day lighter, calmer, unhooked from the constant urge for more. This isn't about giving up on life. It's about learning to live it fully, without chasing, without clinging, without fear of not being enough. Tonight, as you listen, something will shift. Your mind will quiet, your heart will breathe, and for the first time in a long time, you'll feel what's been waiting for you all along. Happiness that doesn't run, happiness that doesn't hide, happiness that finds you the moment you stop chasing. Are you ready? Let's begin. You've just seen that happiness isn't waiting at the end of some future achievement, but has been within you the entire time. Still, one of the biggest reasons people miss this truth is because of desire itself. Desire can be confusing. It pushes us forward. It feels like motivation. It promises that once we get what we want, joy will finally arrive. And yet, when we cling too tightly to that wanting, we often end up exhausted and disappointed. The paradox is that when we loosen our grip, when we stop trying to force life to deliver happiness through outcomes, peace begins to appear naturally. Desire is not something to eliminate. Without it, life would lose its energy. It's what inspires people to create art, write music, fall in love, build families, and pursue meaningful goals. But desire has two sides. On one side, it fuels growth and creativity. On the other, it can trap us in endless cycles of dissatisfaction, always needing the next thing before we allow ourselves to rest. The challenge is learning how to engage with our goals and desires without clinging to them as the sole source of happiness. Most of us have fallen into the habit of postponing happiness. We tell ourselves, I'll be happy when I get that promotion, when I finally meet the right partner, when I move into a better home. But when those things arrive, the joy is short-lived. Soon, the mind is restless again, searching for the next milestone. It's like pouring water into a cracked glass. The more we pour, the more it leaks out. The cycle never ends. Buddhism offers a different approach. It teaches that happiness isn't something waiting at the finish line. It's not dependent on reaching a certain point or checking off a goal. Instead, it emerges when we loosen our grip on outcomes. This doesn't mean giving up on ambitions or refusing to strive for improvement. It means living fully in the process, doing our best with intention, but not attaching our worth or peace to the result. Think of it like planting a garden. You prepare the soil, you water it, you tend to it with care. But you don't stand there demanding the seeds sprout faster. You trust that growth takes its own time, and in the meantime, you enjoy the feel of the earth in your hands, the sunlight on your skin, and the beauty of the garden as it is. Our brains, however, are not wired to rest easily in this perspective. Human beings evolved to be seekers. For our ancestors, survival depended on scanning for threats and chasing after resources. That constant drive kept them alive. But in today's world, where survival is less about immediate danger and more about the pressures of modern life, that same wiring often leaves us restless. We find ourselves endlessly scrolling, comparing, shopping, or planning. We are always in motion, always scanning for the next thing, rarely able to stop and recognize that this moment is already enough. Learning to want without grasping doesn't mean becoming passive or lazy. In fact, it makes us more effective. When we act from a place of calm presence, our minds are clearer, our decisions sharper, and our energy steadier. Athletes often describe being in the zone, fully immersed in what they're doing, unburdened by worry about winning or losing. Ironically, this state of non-attachment is where their best performance emerges. The same is true in everyday life. The less we grasp at results, the more space we have to give our best effort. This is just as true in relationships. When love is burdened with heavy expectations, when we cling to how we think someone must behave or how much attention they must give, we create pressure that suffocates connection. The relationship becomes more about control than love. But when we give freely, without demanding, we allow space for love to flourish. To hold love lightly is to let it breathe. Just as holding a bird too tightly would harm it, so too does clinging harm relationships. The same principle applies to ambition. Society tells us that success defines worth. From a young age, we're taught to compete, to push, to sacrifice peace of mind in order to make it. But what do we really gain if success comes at the cost of our well-being? Buddhism invites us to shift our focus from the destination to the journey. Every step is life itself. Every moment spent striving is also a moment to live. When we stop obsessing over arrival, we start to see joy available right now. There's also an unseen cost to chasing, the subtle exhaustion it brings. Every time you tell yourself, "I'll only be happy when," you send a signal to your own heart that the present is not enough. This creates a quiet, ongoing tension. The body holds it, the mind carries it, and over time it becomes weariness that no amount of success can heal. That is why even people who seem to have everything often feel empty. They've spent years chasing but never paused to rest in the fullness of what already is. The solution isn't to suppress desire, but to transform the way we hold it. Instead of letting desire control us, we can observe it, question it, and let it guide us without enslaving us. When a desire arises, ask yourself, does this come from my deepest values or from a sense of lack? Am I chasing this because I believe it will finally make me whole, or because it expresses something meaningful? That reflection can reveal whether your desire is healthy fuel or just another trap. This is where mindfulness becomes a powerful tool. Mindfulness isn't about silencing every thought. It's about noticing what arises, desire, fear, craving, and recognizing it for what it is, a passing wave. You don't have to obey it, and you don't have to fight it. You can let it come, let it go, and stay grounded in awareness. When you do this, you discover that happiness isn't waiting on the other side of desire. It's already here, in the calm beneath the wave. And with that calm comes a deeper joy in the ordinary, a simple meal, a walk outside, a quiet moment with a friend. These become enough. They don't need to be compared or upgraded. They hold their own quiet perfection. This perspective also weakens the pull of comparison. Instead of constantly measuring your life against others, you can stand firmly in your own path. You don't need to outrun anyone because you've stepped out of the race entirely. This is the heart of the paradox. When you loosen your grip, you don't lose life, you finally gain it. You continue to strive, to love, to dream, but you do so without chains. Desire doesn't disappear, but it transforms. It becomes a guide rather than a master. And in that shift, happiness begins to appear in the very moments where before it felt absent. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering. It isn't desire itself that hurts, but the way we grasp it, the way we demand that life unfold according to our plans. When we release that demand, suffering eases. What arises instead is a sense of coolness, of relief, of peace that doesn't depend on anything outside us. This way of living doesn't kill ambition or passion, it simply purifies it. The musician who plays out of love creates beauty far greater than the one who plays only to win applause. The same is true for us. When we release the need for success to prove our worth, we open ourselves to succeed with joy. Even modern research supports this wisdom. Psychologists studying flow states have found that people are happiest not when they achieve, but when they are deeply absorbed in the act of doing itself. In flow, the obsession with results fades, and what remains is presence. Buddhism has been teaching this for centuries, the joy of being in the moment, of wanting without clinging. To live this truth, begin with small steps. Notice one area where you've been chasing. Ask yourself what it costs you. Then practice loosening the grip. Tell yourself, I can want this, but my peace doesn't depend on it. At first, the mind will resist, but with practice, you'll feel the freedom of no longer being bound by your desires. That freedom changes everything. Work feels lighter, relationships feel freer, and your inner world grows quieter. And in that quiet, happiness appears, not the brief high of achievement, but the steady peace of knowing that right now is already enough. This is the paradox of desire. To want without clinging, to strive without losing yourself, to love without chains. It's not easy, but it's possible. And once you begin, life transforms. The chase ends and living begins. And with this understanding, we move forward, because desire is only the beginning. There are subtler forms of chasing, small, almost invisible habits that weigh us down. The paradox of desire teaches that freedom is found not in killing our wants, but in loosening our grip on them. Yet desire is only one layer of the chase. Beneath it, there are smaller patterns that run our days, subtle reflexes that keep us tied to unrest without us even realizing it. These patterns are not always about money, success, or love. Sometimes they show up in the smallest gestures, the urge to reply instantly to every message, the compulsion to have the last word, the habit of proving ourselves in conversations. They seem harmless, but they drain peace little by little. Learning to release them is a different kind of renunciation, one that doesn't require leaving your home or shaving your head, but one that asks for courage all the same. This kind of renunciation is quiet. It is not dramatic or heroic in the way people often imagine when they hear the word. It doesn't mean walking away from everything you love. It means noticing the micro-attachments that slip through unnoticed and choosing again and again to let them go. These micro-renunciations open space for calm, clarity, and balance to grow. And when practiced consistently, they shift the entire tone of your life. One of the simplest forms of renunciation is restraint in communication. Think about how quickly the urge arises to respond immediately when someone challenges you, criticizes you, or even simply texts you. The pull to defend, to explain, to reply instantly feels automatic, but it isn't. Each time you allow a pause before answering, you renounce the reflex of urgency. That pause is not weakness, it's wisdom. It gives you time to see the situation clearly instead of being dragged by impulse. Over time, this simple habit transforms interactions. You become calmer, more thoughtful, and less reactive. You start to notice how much peace is preserved when you don't feed the fire of urgency. Another powerful micro-renunciation is letting go of the need to win arguments. Many people waste hours of energy trying to prove they are right. The mind equates being right with being safe or respected. But clinging to this impulse often damages relationships and leaves us tense. When you practice releasing the need to win, even in small disagreements, you taste freedom. You begin to realize that peace is more valuable than victory. Often, what matters most is not proving a point, but maintaining harmony. This doesn't mean silencing yourself or allowing disrespect. It means recognizing that proving superiority brings no lasting happiness, while letting go strengthens your own stability. There is also the renunciation of speed. Modern life pushes us into constant motion. We hurry to finish meals, rush through conversations, and multitask through the day. But each time you choose to slow down, to chew your food with awareness, to listen fully without checking your phone, to walk without rushing, you practice renunciation. You release the habit of speed and reclaim the richness of presence. Slowness is not inefficiency. It is a refusal to be ruled by restlessness. It is saying no to the subtle chase of always needing to get somewhere else. Another layer of renunciation involves consumption. Not just food or possessions, but information. The endless scrolling, the compulsive checking of news, the pull to consume more and more digital content are all forms of chasing. Each time you set down the phone instead of reaching for it, you practice renunciation. Each time you choose silence over background noise or one book over 10 half-finished ones, you are quietly reclaiming focus. This is not about rejecting technology, but about recognizing when consumption is controlling you rather than serving you. Renunciation also appears in the realm of emotions. Often we believe that we must immediately act on our feelings. If we feel anger, we express it. If we feel fear, we retreat. If we feel desire, we pursue it. But emotions do not always need immediate expression. The practice of renunciation here means letting an emotion rise and fall without obeying it. For example, when irritation sparks, instead of sending the sharp reply, you breathe and let it soften. When jealousy stirs, instead of feeding it with stories, you watch it pass. This practice doesn't suppress emotions, it simply refuses to let them rule your actions. Over time, this kind of restraint builds immense inner strength. There is also the renunciation of self-importance. Much of human suffering is tied to the subtle desire to be seen, acknowledged, or praised. Every day, the ego whispers, "Show them you matter, prove your worth." Micro-renunciation here means noticing those whispers and choosing not to act on them. It might mean allowing someone else to take credit, declining the urge to broadcast every success, or stepping back instead of pushing to be noticed. Each time you do this, you release the weight of constantly needing affirmation. Slowly, you discover that your value doesn't depend on external recognition. It shines naturally, without being advertised. The renunciation of over-explaining is another quiet but powerful practice. Many of us feel compelled to justify ourselves in every situation. We explain our choices, our mistakes, even our silences, often far more than necessary. This urge is driven by fear of judgment. But when you let go of the need to explain endlessly, you reclaim dignity. You begin to trust that your worth doesn't need defending. This renunciation creates space for self-respect and frees you from the exhausting chase of proving yourself to others. There is also renunciation in desires for perfection. The need to perfect every detail, to polish, to correct, to never make mistakes, is another form of grasping. Letting go here doesn't mean becoming careless. It means releasing the obsession with flawless outcomes. It means finishing a task with care and then allowing it to be enough. This micro-renunciation breaks the cycle of endless dissatisfaction and teaches you to find peace in completion rather than in impossible ideals. Even in conversation, renunciation has its place. The subtle compulsion to interrupt, to dominate, or to turn the focus back on yourself is a habit of clinging. Each time you allow silence, listen fully, or let another person have the last word, you are renouncing ego-driven impulses. These choices build humility and deepen connection. They remind you that listening is often more powerful than speaking. In daily life, renunciation can even appear in choosing not to react to every external trigger. The noise of traffic, the rudeness of strangers, the frustrations of delays, all invite us to fight reality. But when you let these moments be as they are without resistance, you renounce the habit of fighting with life. This doesn't mean passivity, it means conserving your energy for what truly matters. Each time you refuse to engage in unnecessary battles, you strengthen your inner calm. Another form of renunciation is simplicity. This doesn't require selling everything you own, but it does mean questioning constant accumulation. Do you need every new gadget, every extra item of clothing, every upgrade? Each time you choose sufficiency over excess, you are renouncing the chase of material satisfaction. This doesn't impoverish life, it enriches it. Simplicity clears space for what truly brings meaning. Renunciation also shows itself in silence. Our culture glorifies constant talking, sharing, and noise, but choosing silence, even briefly, is a profound act of letting go. Silence allows the mind to settle, the heart to listen, and truth to surface. When you stop filling every gap with words, you renounce the fear of emptiness. In that emptiness, you discover presence. There is also the renunciation of control. We often cling to the illusion that we can control how people act, how outcomes unfold, how the future plays out. But control is mostly an illusion. Each time you release the need to direct every detail, you practice renunciation. Letting life move without your constant interference allows both you and others to breathe. It teaches trust in people, in processes, and in the unfolding of time. Even the way we handle pleasure can be transformed through renunciation. Instead of indulging until pleasure turns into dullness or craving, you can choose to stop at enough, whether in food, entertainment, or comfort. This practice teaches balance. You discover that savoring a little brings more joy than overconsumption. The renunciation of excess does not kill joy. It preserves it. Renunciation in microdoses is not dramatic, but it is powerful because it reshapes the nervous system. Each time you release a small attachment, your body learns to live with less tension. Your mind learns to trust stillness. Your heart learns that peace is not found in more, but in enough. These tiny practices accumulate. Over time, they create a life that feels lighter, freer, and more spacious. This path is not about grand gestures. It is about the daily discipline of letting go in small ways, choosing silence over noise, peace over winning, presence over speed, simplicity over excess, listening over proving. Each act may seem insignificant on its own, but together they build a foundation of inner freedom. And as these micro-renunciations grow, you realize something profound. The power of renunciation is not in loss, but in gain. You gain clarity, strength, calm, and space. You gain the ability to meet life as it is, without needing it to constantly serve your desires. You gain freedom from the subtle chains that once seemed invisible. When you practice small acts of letting go, you begin to taste the ease that comes from not being ruled by every impulse. Yet, there is a deeper layer to all of this, one that sits beneath both desire and renunciation. It is the ongoing effect of chasing itself. Every time the mind runs after something, it leaves a mark. These marks build upon one another and begin to shape how you see the world, how you feel within yourself, and how you act in the future. This is where the idea of karma becomes important, not as punishment or reward, but as the natural imprint of your choices and patterns. The chase carries a hidden cost. On the surface, it looks like motivation, ambition, or drive. Underneath, it drains energy in ways you rarely notice until exhaustion sets in. The constant push toward the next thing doesn't just tire the body. It weaves dissatisfaction into the very fabric of the soul. Each time you chase, you tell yourself that what is here is not enough. That message digs deep and becomes a habit of mind, a default way of meeting life. Over years, this builds into a karmic pattern, a repeating cycle where dissatisfaction gives birth to more dissatisfaction. This exhaustion is subtle. It is not like the fatigue that comes after a day of physical work. It is the weariness of never arriving, the heaviness that grows from living in constant almost. Even when you achieve what you wanted, relief is temporary because the imprint of chasing remains. The nervous system stays on alert, the mind keeps scanning, and the body holds tension as though peace is always around the corner but never here. This state becomes familiar, and familiarity tricks you into believing it is normal. But normal is not the same as healthy. One of the most destructive imprints created by chasing is the inability to rest in satisfaction. You could be sitting in a comfortable home with food in the fridge, friends who care, and yet feel restless because some goal remains unfinished or some possession is still out of reach. This constant awareness of what is missing overshadows what is already present. Over time, it trains the brain to always search for lack. The karmic echo of this habit is that even when blessings come, they are filtered through dissatisfaction. Chasing also creates energetic friction in relationships. When you approach others with hidden agendas, seeking validation, attention, or proof of your worth, you leave behind subtle imprints of pressure and expectation. People feel it, even if unspoken. They sense the weight of being a means to your happiness rather than an end in themselves. That weight erodes trust and intimacy. The karma of such interactions is loneliness, because relationships built on neediness rarely sustain deep connection. On a deeper level, chasing shapes your inner dialogue. Each time you push toward something with the belief that it will complete you, you reinforce the message that you are incomplete. This message settles in like a seed, growing stronger with repetition. The karmic result is a life built on striving to fix what was never broken. Even achievements become part of the chase rather than an end to it. Instead of feeling whole, you feel temporarily patched, waiting for the next repair. The karmic cost is also seen in how the body responds. Stress hormones rise, sleep becomes shallow, digestion weakens, and the immune system falters. The body reads the chase as a sign of constant threat. This state of inner alarm, held for years, becomes illness, fatigue, or burnout. What began as ambition to improve life slowly turns into patterns that diminish vitality. These are karmic consequences, not because someone else imposes them, but because the body itself records every choice. Another subtle consequence of chasing is how it distorts perception of time. When you are always running after what is next, the present moment feels like an obstacle, something to endure on the way to somewhere better. Life becomes a series of waiting rooms. You are never truly here. Over decades, this builds a karmic impression of emptiness, because even though you lived through countless days, you were never fully alive in any of them. The exhaustion of the soul is not simply from effort, but from absence, being absent from your own life while chasing a future that never arrives. Chasing also imprints patterns of comparison. Each time you measure yourself against another, you carve a deeper groove of envy and insecurity. The karmic echo of this is endless dissatisfaction, because there will always be someone ahead, more skilled, more successful, more admired. Comparison is an endless ladder with no top. The soul becomes weary, not from climbing, but from never feeling the ground. The energetic cost of chasing shows up even in creativity. When you create with the intention of proving worth, the joy of expression fades. Art becomes a tool for approval rather than truth. The karmic imprint is that creativity becomes blocked or dry because it is no longer flowing freely, it is chained to outcome. Over time, the soul forgets how to play, how to explore, how to express without fear. This loss is subtle but heavy because it cuts off one of the deepest sources of vitality. The karma of chasing extends into how you relate to yourself. When you chase constantly, you abandon yourself in the present. You ignore your own needs for rest, reflection, or stillness in favor of external goals. The karmic echo is disconnection. You wake up one day feeling like a stranger to yourself, unsure of what you actually value because your identity has been built on pursuit rather than presence. This is one of the most painful forms of exhaustion, not knowing who you are apart from the chase. Even spirituality is not immune. Many begin to chase peace, enlightenment, or awakening as if they were trophies. But the harder you run toward these states, the further they seem. The karmic result is frustration because chasing spiritual experiences carries the same imprint as chasing material ones. The pattern of dissatisfaction repeats itself under a different name. Instead of finding freedom, you carry the same restlessness into your practice. Karmic imprints do not vanish on their own. They ripple into the future until they are met with awareness and transformed. Every time you act from a place of lack, you deepen the groove of lack. Every time you act from presence, you deepen the groove of peace. The good news is that even the heaviest karmic patterns can be reshaped. The first step is noticing the subtle exhaustion that chasing brings. The second is choosing in small ways to step out of it. One way this transformation begins is through awareness of your body. When you feel the urge to chase, whether it's checking your phone, pushing harder at work, or proving a point, pause and notice your body. Do you feel tension in the chest, shallow breath, or restless movement? These are signs of the karmic pattern of chasing taking root in real time. By noticing, you create space to choose differently. Another way is by cultivating gratitude. Gratitude interrupts the karmic imprint of dissatisfaction by directing attention to what is already here. Each moment of genuine appreciation weakens the groove of chasing. Over time, gratitude builds a new pattern, one of sufficiency, of contentment. It doesn't erase desire, but it transforms the energy behind it. Compassion is another antidote. When you practice compassion toward yourself and others, you soften the harsh imprints left by chasing. You begin to see that everyone is caught in similar cycles of striving and exhaustion. Compassion shifts the energy from grasping to giving. This act of turning outward breaks the self-centered loop of dissatisfaction. Slowing down also interrupts karmic patterns. By doing one thing at a time with full attention, you step out of the momentum of the chase. Whether eating, walking, or listening, presence plants seeds of calm. These small choices gradually replace grooves of restlessness with grooves of ease. Meditation deepens this process. Sitting in silence, watching thoughts rise and fall without chasing them, retrains the mind. Each session erodes the habit of grasping. Over time, the karmic imprints of dissatisfaction begin to fade, replaced by the imprint of stillness. This doesn't happen overnight, but every practice session is a step in rewriting the script. The exhaustion of chasing is real, but it is not permanent. Each moment offers a chance to redirect energy, to plant seeds of peace instead of seeds of restlessness. The karmic echoes you carry today are the result of past patterns, but the ones you create now shape the future. The choice is always in your hands, to continue running in circles or to step out of the race and let happiness find you where you stand. The exhaustion of chasing reveals itself not only in what we pursue, but in how we see ourselves while pursuing. Every subtle imprint of restlessness is strengthened by the image we carry of who we believe we must be. Among the most seductive illusions is the belief that we need to be special. It appears innocent, even inspiring, yet this attachment creates some of the heaviest chains. Beneath the desire to stand out lies a fear of being ordinary, unnoticed, or forgotten. And it is this fear, more than anything outside us, that keeps the soul restless. The drive to be special begins early. From childhood, we are praised for being smarter, faster, prettier, or more talented than others. Approval becomes linked with being different. Over time, we internalize the belief that our worth depends on being exceptional. The mind builds an identity around uniqueness, and any threat to it feels like an attack on our very existence. This is why criticism stings so deeply and why comparison burns like fire. It isn't just about others doing well, it is about the fear that our specialness is slipping away. The trouble with attaching to specialness is that it creates endless insecurity. If your worth is tied to being unique, then you can never relax, because uniqueness must be constantly proven. Every achievement has an expiration date. Every recognition is temporary. The moment passes, and the pressure to prove yourself returns. The karmic echo of this attachment is dissatisfaction. No matter how much you accomplish, it will never feel secure. Specialness also separates. When we need to feel above or different, we begin to see others as rivals. Relationships become arenas for competition rather than spaces for connection. Even friendships can carry hidden tension when one person's success feels like the other's failure. Instead of celebrating each other, we silently compare. This subtle competition prevents intimacy, because behind the smile is the fear of being overshadowed. The pursuit of being special also distracts us from authenticity. When we are constantly performing uniqueness, we lose touch with what we actually feel and value. We wear masks to impress, speak words to stand out, and take actions, not because they reflect truth, but because they make us appear extraordinary. Over time, we may even forget who we are without the mask. The self becomes fragmented, hollow beneath the surface display. There is also a spiritual trap hidden in this desire. Even in practices meant to cultivate humility, the ego seeks a way to feel superior. People chase the identity of being the most enlightened, the most aware, the most compassionate. But this too is a form of specialness, and it carries the same dissatisfaction. The peace promised by spirituality slips away when the practice becomes another stage for the ego to perform. Letting go of being special does not mean erasing individuality. It means dissolving the desperate clinging to uniqueness as the foundation of worth. When you loosen this grip, you begin to see that true peace comes not from standing above, but from standing within. You don't need to compete for air, you already breathe. You don't need to prove your place in the world, you already exist. The relief that comes with this letting go is profound. Without the pressure to be extraordinary, you find freedom in simplicity. A quiet walk, a shared meal, a kind word. These no longer feel like interruptions to greatness, but as life itself. You begin to notice the beauty of being part of the whole, not separate from it. The mind, once obsessed with comparison, softens into connection. There is a gentleness that arises when you no longer need to prove yourself. Criticism loses its sting because it no longer threatens your identity. Praise loses its grip because it is no longer the source of your worth. Both become passing breezes rather than defining winds. This balance creates stability. You are steady because your foundation is not in external validation, but in the simple fact of being. When the attachment to specialness dissolves, compassion deepens. No longer seeing others as rivals, you can meet them as equals. Their joys don't diminish you. Their struggles don't elevate you. This shift transforms relationships. Connection grows where competition once lived. Trust builds where insecurity once lurked. In community, this change is powerful. Harmony replaces division. Support replaces envy. On a personal level, creativity flourishes when freed from the demand to be unique. When art, work, or expression no longer carries the burden of proving specialness, it becomes play again. Creativity returns to its natural flow, unforced and joyful. Ironically, the most genuine originality often emerges when you stop trying to be original. True uniqueness arises from authenticity, not from effort. The peace of letting go also transforms ambition. You still pursue goals, but they are not weighted with the need to prove worth. Success becomes sweeter because it is not tied to fear. Failure loses its power to crush because it does not strip you of identity. Ambition becomes healthier, rooted in exploration and contribution rather than desperation. Letting go of specialness also changes how you experience time. When the ego demands constant proof of uniqueness, life feels like a race. There is always urgency, always another milestone. Without this pressure, time opens. Moments expand because you are no longer rushing to prove anything. Presence becomes natural and life regains depth. The body too feels the release. The tension of striving to stand out softens. The constant stress of comparison eases. Energy once spent on performance is freed for living. Rest comes easier, breathing deepens, and health improves because the body is no longer burdened by the nervous pressure of constant proving. At the deepest level, letting go of specialness reveals connection with all life. When the illusion of separateness fades, you see yourself not as above or below, but as part of the same fabric. This recognition brings a humility that is not weakness, but strength. It allows joy in being ordinary, because ordinary is no longer small, it is vast, shared, and alive. This shift does not erase individuality, but reframes it. You still have your gifts, your perspectives, your voice, but they are expressed without anxiety. You contribute to the whole, not to elevate yourself, but because expression is natural. Life flows through you, and in that flow, peace replaces struggle. The suffering created by clinging to specialness is subtle but heavy. It distorts relationships, drains energy, and blocks authenticity. Dissolving this attachment does not strip you of identity. It frees you from the constant fear of not being enough. It allows you to return to simplicity, to connection, and to the quiet strength of simply being. When this truth settles, the chase ends, not because you no longer care about life, but because you finally see that life itself was never waiting for you to be extraordinary. It was waiting for you to simply arrive. Letting go of the need to be special loosens a heavy chain, but beneath that lies another force just as binding: expectation. It is quieter, less obvious, yet it shapes how we meet every moment. Expectation whispers how people should behave, how days should unfold, how the future should look. And when reality does not match, tension rises. This tension may feel natural, but in truth, it is a form of subtle aggression toward life itself. Each expectation is a demand, a way of saying, what is here is not enough until it bends to my will. Expectation is rarely questioned because it hides behind words like hope, standards, or vision. On the surface, it seems harmless. Yet beneath it, expectation is a seed of conflict. When you expect someone to act a certain way, you resist who they are in the present. When you expect the world to follow your script, you resist the world as it is. This resistance, repeated over and over, shapes the nervous system into one of restlessness, irritation, and quiet hostility. It may not always erupt into anger, but the energy of aggression is present. One of the clearest expressions of this is found in relationships. Expecting someone to meet every need, to always understand, to always respond as you wish, sets both of you up for suffering. No one can live up to the endless scripts the mind writes. When they fail, resentment builds. The expectation becomes a lens through which you no longer see the person as they are, but as they fail to be. The hidden violence here is subtle but real. It reduces the person to a role in your story, denying their freedom to simply be. Expectation also distorts how we approach ourselves. When you constantly demand perfection from your own actions, appearance, or achievements, you are at war with yourself. Every mistake becomes evidence of failure, every imperfection a wound. This internal aggression wears the soul down. Instead of being a source of support to yourself, you become your harshest opponent. The karmic echo is exhaustion, not because you worked hard, but because you refuse to allow yourself to be human. Another form of hidden violence appears when expectation collides with time. You expect progress to happen at a certain pace, healing to occur by a certain date, goals to be reached on a specific timeline. When reality takes longer, frustration surfaces. Life becomes a constant argument with time itself, as if time were a servant ignoring your commands. Yet time does not bow to expectation. The more you demand, the heavier the dissatisfaction becomes. This aggression is not only inward, but outward. When expectations are projected onto friends, children, partners, or colleagues, subtle pressure builds. People feel judged, even if nothing is said. They sense that their worth in your eyes is conditional, tied to how well they fulfill your image of them. This unspoken pressure erodes trust and openness. Instead of safety, the relationship carries the undercurrent of demand. Even daily life is shaped by this hidden violence. Expecting constant comfort, flawless service, or uninterrupted ease turns ordinary inconveniences into battles. Traffic, delays, noise, or weather become personal insults, because they fail to match the story in your mind. Each unmet expectation feels like an attack, and so you respond with irritation, as if reality itself were an enemy. This constant friction is one of the deepest sources of unhappiness, and yet it often goes unseen. The practice of loosening expectation does not mean abandoning standards or drifting aimlessly. It means replacing demand with openness. Instead of saying, "This must be so," you say, "Let me meet what is here." This shift turns aggression into gentleness. When people are freed from your expectations, you meet them with curiosity rather than judgment. When life is freed from your demands, you begin to notice details you once missed. Rain is no longer an obstacle, but water nourishing the earth. Silence is no longer emptiness, but space to breathe. Gentleness toward reality does not weaken you. It strengthens resilience. When you no longer cling to rigid outcomes, you adapt with ease. Disappointments shrink because they are no longer violations of your story. They are simply part of life unfolding. This flexibility allows you to conserve energy and meet challenges without bitterness. A powerful practice in dissolving expectation is observing language. Notice how often thoughts begin with should. People should treat me this way. Life should be fair. Success should come faster. Each should is a weapon, subtle but sharp, cutting at reality. By softening this language, shifting from should to could or may, you transform inner aggression into openness. This could happen creates space. This may change allows breathing room. Small shifts in words create profound shifts in energy. Another practice is gratitude. Gratitude interrupts expectation by highlighting what is already here. When you are grateful, you are not demanding more. You are acknowledging enough. This softens the habit of aggression and trains the mind to notice sufficiency instead of lack. The more you practice gratitude, the less grip expectation holds, because contentment grows naturally. Compassion, too, dismantles expectation. When you recognize that others are also carrying their struggles, you release the demand for them to fit your scripts. Compassion sees people as whole, not as characters failing in your play. This creates room for deeper connection, because the relationship is based on acceptance rather than performance. Meditation is another doorway. Sitting in silence, you witness the constant stream of expectations rising in the mind. You see how quickly the mind writes scripts about how things should be. By watching without obeying, you weaken the habit. The mind slowly learns that it can release demands without losing safety. The nervous system settles, and a gentler way of being takes root. Letting go of expectation also changes how you approach goals. Instead of chasing with desperation, you act with intention while allowing outcomes to unfold. You still plan, work, and hope, but without the rigidity of demand. Success then becomes sweeter because it is free from pressure. Failure becomes softer because it is no longer a collapse of identity, but simply part of the process. In everyday life, this gentleness manifests in patience. When you stand in line without irritation, when you listen without interrupting, when you let events take their natural pace, you embody non-aggression. These small acts accumulate, slowly reprogramming the mind away from hostility toward reality. The hidden violence of expectation weakens joy because it creates constant conflict between the world as it is and the world as you demand it to be. By loosening this grip, you step into alignment with life rather than against it. The gentleness that arises is not passive, it is steady, clear, and unshakable. It allows you to move through challenges with calm and to meet others with warmth. It replaces the heavy armor of demand with the lightness of acceptance. Expectation, left unchecked, fuels suffering. But when transformed, it becomes an opportunity for deep peace. Every moment you release a demand, you reclaim energy. Every time you soften a should, you create space for joy. In this space, the world is no longer an enemy to conquer, but a partner to walk with. And in that partnership, gentleness becomes not just a practice, but a way of being. When expectation softens, a new kind of space begins to open. The mind is no longer locked in battle with how life should be, and in that release, something easily overlooked comes into focus, the ordinariness of life itself. What was once dismissed as routine or insignificant reveals itself as the ground of peace. Yet most people miss this because they are conditioned to chase peak experiences. They believe happiness will come in grand moments, once-in-a-lifetime achievements, spectacular adventures, or dramatic turning points. Ordinary days seem dull in comparison, but this belief is the very reason contentment slips away. The pursuit of peak experience creates a hunger that cannot be satisfied. Even when extraordinary moments arrive, they vanish quickly, leaving a craving for more. The contrast between the high of the peak and the rhythm of daily life feels unbearable. Without realizing it, you train yourself to despise the very fabric of existence, the simple, repeated patterns that make up most of your days. The karmic imprint of this is a life that feels perpetually incomplete, as though something better is always missing just beyond reach. Ordinary moments are not a barrier to peace. They are the entry point. When you pour a glass of water, when you sit down to eat, when you sweep the floor, these are not interruptions to real life, but life itself. When attention is present, these moments reveal a quiet beauty, the weight of the glass, the taste of food, the sound of the broom across the floor, each carries depth. When awareness rests fully here, the restless mind begins to settle. The need for peaks fades because the valley is no longer barren, it is alive. This recognition transforms relationships as well. Many people wait for grand gestures, anniversaries, surprises, declarations to feel love. But true intimacy is woven in ordinary exchanges, the way someone listens, the tone of voice in daily conversation, the small acts of care unnoticed by the outside world. When you begin to value these, love deepens. Expecting constant fireworks weakens relationships, but honoring the everyday builds trust and tenderness. There is a liberation that comes when you stop measuring life by its highs. You no longer fear boredom because boredom itself becomes a signal to pay closer attention. What feels dull is often simply unnoticed. The texture of a quiet afternoon, the shifting of light across a room, the sound of footsteps outside, all hold richness when the mind is not racing past them. Presence reveals that there is no such thing as ordinary. There is only unnoticed extraordinary. This way of living also heals the nervous system. The constant hunt for stimulation keeps the body on edge, chasing dopamine spikes that quickly crash. By resting in ordinary rhythms, the body recalibrates. Breathing slows, digestion steadies, sleep deepens. The nervous system learns safety not in extremes, but in steadiness. This is why monks sweeping courtyards or farmers tending fields often radiate calm. Their lives are built on honoring repetition rather than resisting it. The liberation of ordinary moments also dismantles the culture of comparison. In a world where social media glorifies highlights, it is easy to feel inadequate in the face of others' peaks. But when you learn to find sacredness in your own routines, comparison fades. Someone else's vacation or success no longer diminishes your quiet walk, your shared meal, your morning ritual. The craving to match their highlight reel weakens because you see the value in what is already in front of you. A deeper spiritual truth emerges here. The sacred is not hidden in rare events, but woven into the everyday. The Buddha pointed again and again to awareness of simple acts, breathing, walking, eating, as gateways to awakening. These acts are accessible to everyone every day. You do not need to climb mountains or reach enlightenment to taste peace. You need only to meet your ordinary life with full presence. This perspective also shifts ambition. Instead of racing toward rare milestones, you begin to invest in daily practices. Small disciplines, morning meditation, regular gratitude, mindful listening, become more transformative than any single peak achievement. Consistency in the ordinary builds a life that feels whole. Peaks may still come, but they no longer define you. The rhythm itself becomes enough. There is also a profound freedom in no longer fearing repetition. Many people dread routine, believing it steals variety and joy. But repetition can be soothing when met with awareness. The morning coffee, the walk to work, the evening chores, when seen without resistance, they become anchors of stability. They remind you that life is not about novelty, but about presence. In their steadiness, you find peace. The liberation of the ordinary also allows for deeper creativity. When you are not desperate for highs, you begin to see inspiration in small details. A child's question, a bird's call, the changing colors of the sky, these spark insight when you are available to them. Creativity becomes less about chasing inspiration and more about being awake to what is already here. The peace found in ordinariness is also more durable. Peak experiences fade quickly, but daily moments repeat. By rooting happiness in the ordinary, you place it where it is most available. Every day offers opportunities to notice, to appreciate, to rest in simplicity. This makes peace sustainable, not dependent on rare events, but accessible in every breath. There is a humility that grows when you no longer need constant highs. You see that life is not about conquering, but about participating. You become less obsessed with legacy and more engaged with presence. Washing dishes is no longer below you. It is a practice of care. Waiting in line is not wasted time. It is a chance to breathe. Humility replaces arrogance, and peace replaces striving. This shift also heals relationships with yourself. When you value ordinary moments, you stop demanding that every day be extraordinary. You allow yourself to rest, to have quiet days, to not always be achieving. This self-acceptance lifts pressure and creates room for genuine rest. It is a renunciation of self-aggression, a gentle honoring of your humanity. Ordinary life also reveals interconnection. When you notice the small acts that sustain you, the farmer growing food, the worker maintaining roads, the stranger holding a door, you begin to see how deeply your life is supported by countless others. Gratitude for these invisible connections grows, replacing isolation with belonging. The liberation of ordinary moments shows that joy does not need to be sought. It is discovered. It is found in the taste of tea, the warmth of sunlight, the rhythm of breath. When you learn to rest here, the chase ends not because you give up on happiness, but because you see it was never missing. Every day, in countless small ways, it is already present. When you learn to honor the simplicity of daily life, you begin to see that peace does not depend on dramatic events, but on the quality of awareness you bring to each moment. This opens the door to an even subtler truth, one that often goes unnoticed because it hides in silence rather than in activity. There is a quiet gap between desires, a space so ordinary that most people miss it. Yet it is within this space that happiness rests most naturally. Desire arises like a wave. It builds in the mind and body, carrying tension and urgency. Once satisfied, the wave falls and dissolves. Between one desire fading and the next arising, there is a pause. This pause is not empty but full of ease. It is the short moment when the mind is not reaching, not demanding, not grasping. In this brief window, you are free, but the habit of chasing blinds you to it. Most people rush from one want to the next, without noticing the stillness that was available in between. The Buddha pointed to this space as a doorway into liberation. When desire stops for even a moment, the restless wheel of craving halts. What remains is clarity, calm, and sufficiency. You do not need to eliminate all desires to experience this. You only need to notice the natural pause that arises when one is fulfilled or when one falls away unmet. In that interval, you see that happiness does not depend on the next acquisition. It is already here in the absence of striving. The nervous system reveals this truth clearly. Consider the satisfaction after quenching thirst. The moment the body is no longer craving water, there is a release. Muscles soften, breath steadies, the mind relaxes. This release is not created by the water itself, but by the absence of craving once thirst is gone. The relief you feel is not in the object, but in the freedom from wanting. This shows that what you truly seek is not the object of desire, but the space left behind when the grip of desire ends. The same principle can be seen in larger experiences. After striving for a goal and finally reaching it, there is a brief rest. But soon the mind shifts to the next pursuit. The sweetness you feel is not in the goal itself, but in the temporary silence of craving. If you do not see this, you will keep chasing new goals, believing the object provides happiness, when in reality it is the pause that does. This misperception fuels endless striving because the source of joy is misidentified. Learning to recognize this space changes everything. You begin to see that freedom is not at the end of desire, but between desires. By bringing awareness to these pauses, you cultivate a direct taste of peace. Meditation strengthens this recognition. As you sit in stillness, you watch thoughts of wanting rise and fall. Between them, silence appears. At first, it feels fleeting, but with practice, you see it is always present, waiting behind the noise of the mind. The more attention you give it, the more expansive it becomes. This understanding also softens attachment. When you know that the real sweetness comes from the pause after desire ends, the objects themselves lose their power. You can enjoy them without clinging, because you know they are not the true source of happiness. This breaks the cycle of compulsion. You eat the meal, enjoy it, and let it go. You achieve the goal, celebrate, and release it. No longer do you exhaust yourself trying to make temporary experiences permanent. The space between desires also transforms relationships. Much conflict arises from unmet expectations and constant demands on others. When you learn to rest in the intervals, you no longer place impossible pressure on people to complete you. You give them room to be, and in that room, love grows more naturally. Instead of clinging, you find connection. Instead of chasing validation, you find contentment in shared presence. This shift has profound effects on health. The cycle of craving and grasping keeps the body in a state of stress. Restlessness activates tension, elevates heart rate, and clouds sleep. By resting in the pauses, the body learns relaxation, not as an accident, but as a practice. This recalibration restores balance to the nervous system, allowing healing and resilience. Peace becomes embodied rather than abstract. The space between desires also reveals something essential about identity. Much of who you think you are is tied to striving. The roles you play, the achievements you seek, the image you project. But in the pause, all of that falls away. You are not striving to be anything, you are simply present. This glimpse shows you that your true nature is not tied to roles or accomplishments. It is awareness itself, silent, steady, and free. Noticing this space requires training because the mind is conditioned to rush past it. A useful practice is to pause after completing small tasks. After finishing a meal, before reaching for your phone, sit in the quiet for a moment. After sending an email, rest your hands and breathe before starting the next. These small pauses reveal the taste of freedom in ordinary life. Over time, you begin to see that peace is not rare, but woven between every action. Another practice is to notice the breath. Between inhalation and exhalation, there is a natural pause. This pause is effortless and recurring. Resting awareness there trains the mind to find comfort in stillness. The breath becomes a teacher, showing that the rhythm of life includes natural spaces of silence. By attuning to these, you strengthen the ability to rest in the gaps between desires. The insight into this space also reshapes ambition. You do not stop setting goals or working toward them, but the energy behind them shifts. Instead of chasing completion for the promise of happiness, you approach goals as expressions of creativity and contribution. You know that peace is not at the finish line, but available throughout. This makes effort lighter, more joyful, less desperate. Success and failure both lose their sting, because neither defines your access to contentment. Culturally, this wisdom is radical. Consumerism thrives on convincing you that happiness is in the next purchase, the next upgrade, the next experience. Recognizing that joy arises in the absence of craving undermines this cycle. It frees you from manipulation and restores sovereignty over your inner state. You are no longer at the mercy of advertising or comparison, because you know the real treasure is already within you, always accessible in the pauses. This insight also fosters compassion. When you see how craving drives suffering, you recognize that others are caught in the same cycle. You feel less judgment and more understanding toward their struggles. Compassion arises not from superiority, but from shared humanity. You know the relief of the pause, and you wish that ease for others as well. Ultimately, the space between desires points to the heart of Buddhist teaching, that suffering is not created by life itself, but by the grasping of the mind. When grasping stops, even briefly, suffering ends. The pause reveals this truth directly. You do not need to wait for enlightenment to glimpse it. You can taste it now, in the silence that follows every craving. With awareness, these glimpses grow longer and more stable, until they become the foundation of how you live. Happiness hides in this space, not because it is rare, but because it is overlooked. The mind rushes to the next want, blind to the freedom already present. By slowing down, by attending to the intervals, you uncover the secret that peace is not in acquiring, but in the absence of grasping. The chase ends not by force, but by recognition. The joy you seek is already here, waiting in the stillness between desires. When the hidden piece of the space between desires begins to reveal itself, the mind often resists. It is not used to stillness, and so it looks for another way to stay busy. Instead of resting, it finds new forms of movement, and one of the most seductive disguises it creates is busyness. Busyness looks productive, it looks responsible, it looks like progress. But beneath the surface, it often carries the same energy of chasing, just dressed in more respectable clothing. Busyness is praised in modern culture. To be busy is to be important. People wear it like a badge, answering questions about their lives with long lists of commitments, as if fullness of schedule equals fullness of meaning. But this is often an illusion. Many stay busy not because everything they do is necessary, but because slowing down would force them to face the unease that silence reveals. Busyness becomes a refuge, a place to hide from stillness, from emptiness, from unresolved emotions. The danger of this false refuge is that it drains without fulfilling. You can fill every hour with tasks and still feel hollow at the end of the day. The cycle is addictive. The more you do, the less you feel, and the less you feel, the more you do. Productivity becomes a way of numbing, a way of avoiding the deeper work of presence. The karmic imprint is dissatisfaction, because no matter how much is accomplished, the sense of incompleteness remains. This shows up in work culture most clearly. Many believe that endless activity equals value. Long hours are mistaken for dedication, busyness for contribution. Yet, when examined closely, much of this activity is shallow. Emails that did not need to be sent, meetings that solved nothing, reports that no one will truly read. The movement creates the appearance of progress, but clarity is lost. Stepping back often reveals that fewer, more intentional actions create far more impact than constant motion. Busyness also invades personal life. Days become filled with errands, entertainment, social obligations, and distractions. There is always something next. Another notification, another episode, another scroll. These activities may not be harmful individually, but when piled together without pause, they create noise that drowns out presence. Life becomes fragmented, attention scattered, and genuine connection rare. The illusion of being occupied replaces the reality of being alive. The root of busyness is often fear. Fear of being unworthy, if not productive. Fear of being left behind. Fear of facing silence, where unresolved pain or emptiness might surface. The mind convinces itself that constant motion will keep these fears at bay, but avoidance only strengthens them. What you refuse to face grows stronger in the shadows. Busyness becomes a cage disguised as freedom, trapping you in cycles that prevent true clarity. The first step in dismantling this false refuge is honesty. You must ask whether the things filling your day are truly essential or whether they are distractions dressed as duties. This inquiry can be uncomfortable because it threatens identities built around being efficient, reliable, or successful. But when you see clearly, you begin to notice how much of your life energy is spent on tasks that serve ego more than purpose. Clarity arises when you step back and create space. When you pause before saying yes to another responsibility, you give yourself room to ask, does this align with what truly matters? When you leave empty time in your schedule, you discover that life does not collapse. Instead, you find breath, rest, and openness. In that openness, insights appear. Decisions become clearer, priorities more obvious. What once seemed urgent is revealed as trivial. This stepping back does not mean abandoning responsibilities. It means engaging with them consciously rather than compulsively. Washing dishes with awareness, writing one meaningful email instead of 10 rushed ones, spending time with a loved one without distraction. These are not less productive. They are deeply productive because they preserve energy and cultivate presence. The quality of action matters more than the quantity. Another practice to dissolve the illusion of busyness is stillness. Sitting quietly, even for a few minutes, reveals how restless the mind is. At first, discomfort rises, the urge to check the phone, to plan, to move. But if you stay, the restlessness softens. Stillness shows that the urge to be busy is not a necessity, but a habit. By practicing stillness, you retrain the nervous system to rest in calm rather than chaos. Nature also teaches this lesson. Trees grow without rushing, rivers flow without schedules, seasons shift without urgency. None of this is wasted motion, yet none of it is frantic. Aligning with these rhythms shows that true productivity is steady, patient, and effortless compared to the human obsession with constant activity. Observing nature reminds you that clarity comes not from doing more, but from being in harmony with what is. Busyness also hides in the mind's narrative about identity. Many people believe, if I stop, I will fall behind, or if I rest, I will lose value. These beliefs keep the wheel spinning, but when examined, they dissolve. Falling behind compared to whom? Losing value in whose eyes? These questions reveal that busyness is often fueled by comparison and fear of judgment. Letting go of these beliefs weakens the compulsion to overfill life. Slowing down restores depth to relationships. When you are no longer rushing from one task to the next, you have time to listen, to notice, to connect. A conversation becomes meaningful when not treated as an item on a checklist. Presence communicates more than words ever could. Busyness robs relationships of depth, but stillness nourishes them. The liberation from busyness also restores creativity. In constant motion, the mind has no space to wander or dream. Ideas need stillness to grow. Many breakthroughs in art, science, and philosophy arose not in moments of frenzy, but in quiet reflection. When you create margin in your life, inspiration finds room to enter. Busyness suffocates it. Silence invites it. The body benefits as well. Constant motion without rest depletes energy and weakens resilience. Stepping away allows the body to recover, the nervous system to reset, and vitality to return. True productivity requires balance, not overextension. Just as fields must lie fallow to remain fertile, the human body and mind require rest to function fully. Letting go of busyness also shifts how you define success. Instead of measuring life by the number of tasks completed, you begin to measure by the depth of experience, the clarity of intention, the peace of mind. Success becomes less about being constantly occupied and more about living meaningfully. This redefinition breaks the illusion that busyness equals value. Ultimately, the false refuge of busyness crumbles when you recognize that clarity is found not in doing more, but in doing less with presence. Stepping away does not weaken you. It strengthens your vision. It allows you to meet life directly, without the noise of unnecessary tasks. The chase for worth through busyness ends, and in its place, you discover the simplicity of being clear, steady, and free. When the illusion of busyness begins to fall away, another layer of the chase is exposed. Even when the calendar is cleared, even when the body slows, the mind often remains restless. It begins to search for something just out of reach, something that promises to make the present worthwhile. This is the ego's addiction to next. It is the quiet, insistent voice that says, "The next job will complete me, the next partner will heal me, the next stage of life will finally bring peace." Beneath its tone lies a belief that what is here can never be enough. This addiction to what comes next is deeply woven into culture. From childhood, people are told to look ahead, to the next grade, the next achievement, the next step in the ladder of life. The habit becomes automatic, so much so that most do not see it as a choice. The mind lives in perpetual anticipation, rarely resting in the present. Even celebrations of success are short-lived, quickly replaced by new targets. The moment of arrival collapses into another departure, and the cycle continues without pause. The cost of this addiction is constant dissatisfaction. When the ego is obsessed with next, the present moment feels incomplete. Meals are eaten while thinking of the next task. Conversations are held while waiting to say the next thought. Journeys are taken with eyes fixed on the next destination. Life slips past, not because it is short, but because attention is elsewhere. The karmic imprint is a life lived half absent, always waiting for a better tomorrow that never fully arrives. This obsession creates a deep restlessness. Even in stillness, the mind searches for what is missing. A quiet afternoon feels wasted unless it leads to progress. A relationship feels unstable unless it promises a future outcome. An achievement feels hollow unless it secures the next step. The ego thrives on forward motion, but the soul is drained by it. Restlessness becomes the background noise of life, so constant that it begins to feel normal. The addiction to next also corrodes relationships. When people are seen only as steps to the next phase, partners as means to marriage, colleagues as means to promotion, friends as means to opportunity, they are no longer valued for themselves. This instrumental view breeds disconnection. Relationships lose depth because they are filtered through the lens of utility. True intimacy requires presence, but presence is impossible when the mind is already living in what comes after. Career and ambition are fertile grounds for this addiction. The culture of constant advancement teaches that value lies in upward motion. The next job title, the next salary bracket, the next recognition becomes the measure of worth. But even at the peak of achievement, the pattern continues. There is always another horizon, another comparison, another way to feel behind. The ego convinces you that peace lies in the next promotion, but when it arrives, peace does not stay. The habit itself is the problem, not the object pursued. The addiction to next also manifests in personal identity. People tell themselves, "I will be happy when I lose weight, when I move to a better city, when I start fresh." Life becomes a conditional contract with the future. This conditionality drains joy from the present, because identity is always placed in a state of becoming rather than being. The sense of self feels unstable, always waiting to be validated by the next change. This constant reaching reshapes the nervous system. The body lives in a state of subtle tension, anticipating what comes after. Sleep is shallow because the mind rehearses tomorrow. Meals do not nourish because attention is elsewhere. Even leisure is restless as the ego wonders what will come after the break. Over time, this produces exhaustion not from activity, but from the inability to rest. The body carries the weight of a future that never arrives. The addiction to next also obscures gratitude. When the focus is on what is coming, what is here is overlooked. A job once prayed for becomes a burden because the next job is not yet here. A partner once cherished becomes ordinary because the mind fantasizes about what could come after. The home once celebrated becomes unsatisfying because the next upgrade looms in thought. Gratitude cannot coexist with constant forward projection. Breaking free from this addiction requires recognition that the promise of next is an illusion. The joy you expect from the future is never in the future. It is in the gap that opens when desire falls silent. That gap is available now, not later. The challenge is to stop outsourcing peace to tomorrow and to reclaim it in the present. A practical way to loosen the grip of next is to notice small completions. When you finish a task, instead of rushing to the next, pause and rest in the satisfaction of completion. This pause interrupts the cycle of constant forward motion. Over time, it retrains the mind to value presence over projection. Another approach is mindfulness in ordinary actions. When walking, simply walk. When eating, simply eat. The ego will try to pull you forward, thinking of the next step, the next bite. But with practice, you return to the current moment. This anchors you in what is, revealing that peace is not waiting in the distance, but available now. Reflection also helps dissolve the illusion. Consider past achievements that once seemed like the key to happiness. Notice how quickly they faded into the background, replaced by new desires. This recognition weakens the belief that the next thing will be different. It exposes the pattern as a cycle, not a solution. The addiction to next is not just individual, but collective. Societies glorify progress, expansion, growth. Economies depend on the promise of more. Breaking free requires courage to step against cultural current, to value depth over speed, sufficiency over accumulation. This courage does not isolate you, it liberates you from systems that thrive on your perpetual dissatisfaction. Letting go of next does not mean abandoning dreams or refusing growth. It means releasing the desperation that ties happiness to outcomes. Goals can still inspire, but they are pursued from wholeness rather than lack. The journey itself becomes meaningful because you are present in it rather than rushing through it. Success no longer defines your worth, and failure no longer erases it. Both are simply experiences, not verdicts. When the addiction weakens, life regains texture. Colors seem brighter because you are here to see them. Conversations deepen because you are not rushing ahead. Meals satisfy because you are present to taste them. Time feels richer because it is no longer spent waiting for something else. The ordinary becomes extraordinary, not because it has changed, but because your attention has. At its heart, the ego's obsession with next is a refusal to accept that life is already enough. But when you stop running, you discover a peace that does not depend on arrival. The cycle breaks, and you see that happiness was never waiting in the next chapter. It was hidden in the page you were already on. The addiction to what comes next shows how the ego endlessly pulls the mind forward, refusing to rest in what is. But this restless energy does not only express itself in careers, relationships, or material desires. It can also sneak into the spiritual path itself. The search for awakening, peace, or enlightenment can become another chase, another identity, another competition dressed in sacred clothing. This is what many teachers call spiritual materialism, the hidden tendency to treat inner growth as a possession, a badge of honor, or a way of elevating the self. Spiritual materialism is subtle because it disguises itself as sincerity. On the surface, it looks like discipline, devotion, or aspiration. Beneath it, the same hunger for specialness and future reward operates. Instead of chasing money or recognition, one begins chasing mystical experiences, profound insights, or the identity of being advanced on the path. The ego adapts, changing costumes but keeping the same underlying addiction: more, better, higher. This pattern often begins innocently. Someone discovers meditation, yoga, or wisdom teachings and feels genuine relief. The practice soothes restlessness, opens clarity, and brings glimpses of peace. But soon the mind grasps at those glimpses, turning them into goals. Meditation becomes not a space of letting go, but a performance. How deep can I go? How quickly can I awaken? How can I compare my progress with others? The practice, meant to dissolve grasping, becomes another object of grasping. The danger here is that the ego hijacks what was meant to free you. Instead of loosening attachment, spiritual practice tightens it by attaching identity to being spiritual. People begin to talk in spiritual language, dress in spiritual fashion, or collect spiritual experiences like trophies. They measure worth by how calm they appear, how long they meditate, or how many retreats they attend. This is not peace, but performance. It is not liberation, but another form of subtle imprisonment. Spiritual materialism also manifests in the search for extraordinary states. Many chase bliss, visions, or altered experiences as proof of progress. Yet the Buddha and countless teachers emphasized that the real measure of practice is not peak states, but freedom from craving, compassion toward others, and presence in ordinary life. When spirituality becomes a hunt for highs, it mirrors the same cycle as material chasing. Temporary satisfaction followed by emptiness and the need for more. Another form of this disguised chasing is the identity of the humble seeker. Ego thrives not only on pride, but also on the appearance of humility. Someone may downplay their practice publicly, but inwardly cling to the belief that they are more advanced or purer than others. This creates division, turning spirituality into hierarchy. Instead of dissolving the self, the practice builds a subtler, more rigid self-image. The karmic cost of spiritual materialism is profound. Instead of loosening restlessness, it deepens it. People may practice for years, yet remain agitated, judgmental, or anxious, because the practice is rooted in striving rather than surrender. Even compassion can become distorted, helping others not for their sake, but to reinforce the image of being kind or holy. The very path meant to dissolve ego becomes fertilizer for it. The antidote begins with honesty. You must ask, why am I practicing? Is it to chase an identity, to look advanced, to gain approval, to escape pain, or to rest in truth? This inquiry can feel uncomfortable because it strips away illusions. Yet without this honesty, practice becomes performance, and performance cannot lead to freedom. Another antidote is to return to simplicity. Spiritual practice is not about achieving rare states, but about meeting this moment with awareness. Washing a cup, walking down a street, breathing quietly, these are as sacred as visions and insights. When you anchor practice in the ordinary, the chase for extraordinary loosens. You see that freedom is not far away, but already here in simple presence. Humility, when genuine, also dismantles spiritual materialism. True humility does not mean self-deprecation. It means recognizing that awakening is not personal achievement. It is not a prize to be won, but a reality to be uncovered. No one owns enlightenment. When this truth settles, comparison falls away. Your path is not measured against another's. It is simply the unfolding of awareness in your life. A powerful way to disarm spiritual chasing is to release attachment to outcomes in practice. When you meditate, let go of trying to reach calm or insight. Sit simply to sit. When you serve, release the need to be seen as generous. Serve simply to serve. When you study, release the urge to appear wise. learn simply to learn. This shift transforms practice from performance into presence. Community also helps. Practicing with others reveals blind spots that ego alone cannot see. Friends on the path can gently mirror when striving takes over, when comparison arises, or when identity begins to build around practice. In genuine community, people support each other not to be more spiritual, but to be more authentic. It is also important to remember that spirituality is not separate from daily life. The ego thrives on compartmentalization, turning practice into something reserved for retreats, temples, or rituals. But if awareness does not infuse work, relationships, and routine, it remains incomplete. Carrying practice into every interaction dismantles the illusion of spirituality as a possession. It shows that the true path is not about adopting a role, but about living with integrity and presence wherever you are. Teachers across traditions have warned against this trap. Chogyam Trungpa coined the term spiritual materialism precisely to describe how seekers confuse the path with acquisition. His message was clear: the ego will use anything, even spirituality, to strengthen itself. Recognizing this is not cause for despair, but for vigilance. Awareness of the trap is itself part of awakening. When you release the need to own spirituality, peace arises naturally. The competition ends, the performance fades, and practice returns to its essence, resting in awareness, cultivating compassion, living with clarity. There is no trophy at the end of the path, no badge that proves arrival. There is only presence, here and now, available to anyone willing to stop chasing even under the banner of enlightenment. In this way, the false chase of spiritual materialism dissolves, and what remains is authentic practice. Not spectacular, not dramatic, but steady, grounded, and real. The ego's disguises fall away, and in their absence, peace is revealed as what it always was. Not an acquisition, but the natural state of a mind that no longer grasps. When the disguise of spiritual chasing is stripped away, what often remains is another habit of the mind, an insistence that everything must be tied up, completed, resolved. The ego is uncomfortable with loose ends, unanswered questions, or open spaces. It wants closure, certainty, and finality. Yet life itself is unfinished by nature. The refusal to accept this truth creates suffering, while the willingness to embrace incompleteness opens a door to freedom. The pressure to be finished shows up in countless ways. People feel it in their careers, where they push toward a final position or level of recognition, as if a rival will end all striving. They feel it in relationships, wanting the perfect resolution of love without conflict, as if intimacy were supposed to reach a state where nothing more is required. They even feel it within themselves, longing to reach a final version of identity, a stable self that no longer changes. But existence is fluid, and clinging to finality is like trying to freeze a river. This compulsion for resolution shapes how people relate to problems. When something uncomfortable arises, uncertainty about the future, tension in relationships, inner conflict, the mind rushes to fix it. Yet many problems are not meant to be solved instantly. They are meant to be lived with, observed, allowed to unfold over time. By forcing resolution, You often create more conflict. You tighten knots rather than loosen them. The peace you seek is not in hurrying to finish, but in resting with the process. The obsession with being finished also hides in the pursuit of knowledge. Many people crave complete answers, final philosophies, airtight systems that explain everything. But wisdom grows in the space where questions remain open. When you can sit with not knowing, insight has room to deepen. The demand for certainty closes doors, while acceptance of incompleteness keeps curiosity alive. The wisest minds in history have spoken not from certainty, but from humility, knowing that mystery is not a flaw, but the heart of reality. The addiction to closure also affects creativity. Artists, writers, and thinkers often feel blocked, not because they lack ideas, but because they demand perfection before expression. They want the work to be finished before it begins. This fear of imperfection stifles creation. When you release the need for a flawless result, you discover the freedom to create with playfulness. The work may remain incomplete, but in that incompleteness is authenticity. Masterpieces often emerge not from perfection, but from the courage to stay open. On a deeper level, the compulsion for resolution creates tension within identity itself. Many long for a final version of who they are, a fixed story that makes sense of their lives. But identity is fluid, changing with experiences, relationships, and stages of life. The attempt to lock it into place creates conflict when reality does not match the story. By embracing the unfinished self, you allow growth without fear. You no longer see change as failure, but as the natural movement of life. The nervous system reveals this pattern as well. When you demand closure, the body holds tension. Muscles tighten, breath shortens, energy contracts. The body braces against uncertainty. But when you accept incompleteness, the body relaxes. Breathing deepens, muscles soften, and energy flows more freely. The peace that arises is not from solving everything, but from releasing the demand that everything be solved. In relationships, embracing the unfinished allows love to breathe. Conflict no longer has to be seen as a sign of failure, but as part of the ongoing process of intimacy. People change, dynamics shift, challenges arise. When you let go of the fantasy of perfect resolution, you meet relationships as living, evolving connections. This perspective reduces pressure and increases compassion, because you no longer expect permanence in a world that is always moving. The freedom of being unfinished also reshapes ambition. Instead of racing toward a final goal, you begin to see life as a path without an end point. Each step matters, not because it gets you to a finish line, but because it is lived fully. Success and failure lose their heaviness because both are simply experiences along the way. This shift allows ambition to become play rather than burden, exploration rather than desperation. Embracing incompleteness also transforms how you relate to mortality. Many fear death because they feel unfinished, dreams unmet, experiences missed, questions unanswered. But when you learn to live with incompleteness, death loses its terror. You see that life itself is always unfinished, and that is not a flaw, but a fact. Each moment lived fully is complete in itself, even if the story never ties together neatly. Spiritual traditions often emphasize this truth. Zen speaks of beginner's mind, a state of openness that never seeks final closure. Taoism speaks of flow, where completion is never forced, but always shifting. These teachings remind us that peace comes not from finishing, but from being present within the ongoing. To demand resolution is to fight the nature of existence. To embrace incompleteness is to align with it. Practical ways to embody this freedom include pausing when the urge for closure arises. When faced with an unanswered question, allow yourself to rest in the not knowing. When conflict arises, resist the urge to fix it immediately. When a project feels unfinished, permit it to remain open for a while. These small practices train the mind to find comfort in process rather than in conclusion. Meditation offers another doorway. By sitting in silence without seeking a specific result, you experience firsthand the freedom of incompleteness. Thoughts rise and fall, feelings come and go, and you practice resting with them rather than resolving them. Over time, this builds resilience to uncertainty. You discover that peace is possible even when nothing is settled. This perspective also fosters compassion toward yourself. When you drop the demand to be complete, you release self-criticism. You no longer attack yourself for not having it all figured out, for not being perfect, for not reaching some imagined end point. Instead, you treat yourself as a work in progress, worthy of kindness at every stage. This gentleness is not weakness, but strength, because it allows you to grow without fear. The freedom of being unfinished also opens doors to deeper connection with others. When you accept your own incompleteness, you accept theirs as well. You stop demanding that people be fully resolved, fully healed, fully consistent. You meet them in their humanity, where contradictions and uncertainties live. This creates space for authentic connection, where both people can be imperfect without fear of rejection. Even the way you experience time shifts. When you release the need for completion, you no longer rush through the present to reach a conclusion. Time expands because each moment is allowed to stand on its own. Waiting becomes less painful because you are not straining for resolution. The present becomes rich, not because it is finished, but because it is lived. The beauty of incompleteness is that it keeps life alive. Finality is static. Incompleteness is dynamic. When you accept that life is unfinished, you see that growth never ends, discovery never stops, and peace is not found in arriving, but in walking. This is the liberation hidden in imperfection. To live without the weight of needing to be done, to rest in the openness of what is still unfolding. When the mind learns to rest in the freedom of being unfinished, another truth becomes clear. The craving for resolution was never about finality alone. It was also about never feeling that what you have, who you are, or where you stand is enough. The chase is fueled by a quiet but relentless belief that something is missing. And in this constant grasping, the subtle joy of enough is overlooked. Enough is not a single point to reach. It is a practice, a way of meeting life moment by moment. Yet the habit of chasing blinds us to it, convincing us that contentment belongs only to some future version of ourselves. Chasing blocks enough because it creates a moving horizon. Each time you approach what once seemed sufficient, the mind redraws the line. The job that once felt like a dream becomes ordinary. The partner you once prayed for is seen through the lens of flaws. The possessions that once brought excitement fade into background noise. This shifting horizon means that no matter how much you achieve, the sense of sufficiency slips away. The habit of chasing itself prevents rest. The cultural environment reinforces this pattern. Consumerism thrives on convincing people that enough does not exist. Advertisements whisper that satisfaction is always one purchase away. Success is defined by accumulation, comparison, and perpetual growth. In such a culture, stillness looks like failure, and sufficiency looks like settling. The system feeds on dissatisfaction, and so the ability to practice enoughness becomes an act of quiet rebellion. Enoughness is not about stopping desire altogether. Desire is natural. It moves life forward. The practice of enoughness is about seeing clearly when desire tips into craving, when it stops being a healthy expression of growth and becomes a trap of restlessness. It is about recognizing the moment when wanting more blinds you to the blessings already present. Enoughness is found not in refusing all wants, but in remembering that joy is available without them. One of the obstacles to enoughness is comparison. When you measure your life against others, sufficiency disappears. Someone will always have more, and in comparison, your own life will appear lacking. But when attention turns away from comparison, gratitude arises. Gratitude is the soil in which enoughness grows. By noticing the details of what is here, the breath, the meal, the connection, you anchor joy in the present rather than outsourcing it to an imagined future. Enoughness is also a bodily experience. The nervous system is wired to detect threat and scarcity, and when overstimulated, it keeps the body in a state of grasping. Learning to calm the body through rest, breath, or mindful presence allows the sense of sufficiency to surface. When the body feels safe, the mind does not chase as aggressively. This shows that enough is not an idea to convince yourself of, but a state of alignment between body and awareness. Relationships reveal the power of enough as well. Many conflicts arise not because love is absent, but because expectations overshadow it. Wanting a partner to be different, to provide more, to meet every unspoken need, blocks the ability to see the goodness already present. Practicing enoughness in relationships means honoring what is shared rather than resenting what is missing. This does not mean accepting harm or neglect. It means releasing the endless pressure of perfection and finding peace in the ordinary expressions of care. The practice of enoughness also transforms ambition. When driven by lack, ambition becomes destructive. It devours time, health, and peace in the name of more. But ambition rooted in enoughness is different. It arises not from desperation, but from expression. You still create, build, and strive, but you do so with balance. You know that your worth is not dependent on the outcome. This makes success more joyful and failure less crushing because both rest on the foundation of sufficiency. Enoughness does not mean stagnation. It means that growth is chosen freely, not compulsively. It means that exploration adds to life, but is not required for life to be whole. This distinction is crucial. Chasing tells you that happiness requires more. Enoughness shows you that happiness is already here, and that growth is a bonus, not a condition. Another obstacle to enoughness is the mind's attachment to drama. The ego thrives on stories of striving and overcoming, on the grand narrative of pursuit. Ordinary sufficiency feels too quiet to the ego, too simple. Yet this quiet is exactly where peace lives. The challenge is to retrain the mind to value subtle joy over dramatic highs. This is why meditation often feels boring at first, because the mind resists the simplicity of enough. With patience, however, the simplicity reveals its depth. Enoughness is also about releasing the fear of missing out. Modern life floods you with images of what others are doing, convincing you that your life is incomplete without the same experiences. But the truth is that joy does not multiply by chasing every possibility. It deepens by fully inhabiting the ones you choose. Saying yes to everything dilutes experience. Saying yes to what is here and no to what distracts reveals the fullness of enough. Practicing enoughness requires vigilance. The pull of chasing is strong, and the culture around you constantly feeds it. This is why enoughness is not a conclusion, but a daily practice. Each day you ask, what is already sufficient? Each day you return to gratitude, presence, and simplicity. With repetition, the mind begins to rest more easily, and the body learns the feeling of contentment. Enoughness also has a communal dimension. A culture obsessed with more creates inequality, exploitation, and environmental harm. When individuals practice enough, they disrupt this cycle. They consume less, hoard less, and share more. This creates space for balance, both within society and with the earth. Practicing enoughness is not only personal liberation, but also collective healing. The joy of enough is subtle because it does not shout. It does not carry the thrill of acquisition or the rush of achievement. It is quiet, steady, and nourishing. It arises when you drink water with full attention, when you sit in silence without needing more, when you feel gratitude for what is already here. This subtlety is why many overlook it, rushing past in search of louder satisfactions. But once you taste it, you realize its depth far outweighs the fleeting highs of chasing. Enoughness is not the end of desire, nor is it a static state. It is a rhythm, a practice of noticing, pausing, and resting in sufficiency before the next wave of wanting arrives. It is the skill of seeing that nothing more is required in this moment for peace to be complete. And when this practice becomes natural, the chase loosens its grip and life regains its quiet radiance. When the practice of enoughness begins to take root, its greatest threat often comes from the habit of comparison. Even when you feel sufficiency in your own life, the moment you look sideways at what others have, the subtle joy of enough can crumble. Comparison is one of the oldest habits of the mind. It whispers, yes, you may have enough, but look at them. They have more. They are better. They are further ahead. This quiet voice pulls you out of presence and back into chasing. To heal from it is to reclaim your own worth, unmeasured and unconditioned. Comparison often begins in innocence. As children, you notice differences. Who can run faster? Who gets higher grades? Who receives more praise? Over time, those comparisons become tied to identity. You start to believe your value depends on being ahead of others. This belief hardens into adulthood, where careers, relationships, possessions, and even happiness itself are measured against someone else's scale. The result is a life lived not on your terms, but on the terms of an endless race. The pain of comparison is subtle but sharp. Even when you achieve something meaningful, the mind quickly undercuts it by pointing to someone who has done more. Instead of celebrating, you diminish yourself. This cycle ensures that satisfaction never lasts, because there is always another person against whom you come up short. The chase does not stop because the target keeps moving. Comparison also distorts relationships. When others are seen as rivals, connection weakens. A friend's success becomes a source of discomfort rather than joy. A colleague's promotion feels like your loss rather than their gain. Even within families, comparison creates division. Siblings weighed against each other, parents measuring children by achievements. Love and trust are eroded when comparison takes root, replaced by jealousy, insecurity, and quiet resentment. On a deeper level, comparison obscures your true path. When you measure yourself against others, you drift from what is authentic to you. You chase what looks impressive rather than what feels meaningful. You take jobs, pursue goals, or adopt lifestyles, not because they fit your heart, but because they fit an image of success defined by someone else. The cost of this misalignment is a life that may look full on the outside, but feels empty within. The body carries the burden of comparison as well. It shows up as tension in the chest, shallow breathing, restless thoughts. Each comparison triggers the nervous system as if you are under threat, because the ego interprets being behind as danger. This chronic stress wears on the body, leading to fatigue, anxiety, and even illness. The healing begins not with more accomplishments, but with releasing the habit of measuring worth against others. The practice of non-comparison begins with awareness. Each time the thought arises, "They are ahead, I am behind, I should be more like them," pause and name it for what it is, a thought, not a truth. Seeing it clearly weakens its hold. Over time, you learn to recognize comparison as a conditioned pattern rather than an accurate reflection of your value. Gratitude is another antidote. When you focus on what is present, comparison loses fuel. You cannot fully appreciate your own blessings while simultaneously envying another's. By turning attention to the details of your life, the people, opportunities, experiences, you cultivate a sense of sufficiency that comparison cannot easily shake. Gratitude reorients the mind from scarcity to abundance. Compassion also plays a vital role. When you see that others' successes and struggles are not measures against you, but reflections of their own journeys, the edge of comparison softens. Compassion allows you to celebrate others without feeling diminished. It reminds you that worth is not a limited resource. Their joy does not reduce yours, just as their progress does not erase your path. Another powerful shift is to anchor worth in being rather than doing. When value is tied to achievements, comparison thrives. But when you recognize that your worth is intrinsic, present simply because you exist, the measuring tape loses relevance. No accomplishment by another can reduce the value of your being. This recognition may feel subtle at first, but with practice, it builds an unshakable foundation of self-worth. Non-comparison also requires redefining success. Instead of measuring by external milestones, ask, am I aligned with my values? Am I living with integrity? Am I growing in compassion and presence? These measures cannot be compared because they are deeply personal. By setting your compass inward rather than outward, you release the need to constantly scan others for direction. Silence and solitude nurture this practice as well. In stillness, the noise of competition fades, and you reconnect with your own rhythm. The more you listen inwardly, the less you are swayed by external comparisons. Meditation, walking in nature, or even simple breathing exercises create space for this reconnection. In these moments, you taste freedom from the endless race. Healing from comparison also means loosening your grip on social mirrors. The modern world amplifies comparison through constant exposure to curated images of others' lives. Recognizing this distortion is essential. What you see is not the whole truth, but a carefully shaped fragment. Reclaiming peace requires stepping back from these mirrors and anchoring attention in lived experience rather than digital illusions. The practice of non-comparison reshapes relationships into spaces of support rather than rivalry. When you release the need to measure, you can celebrate others sincerely. You can also receive their success as inspiration rather than threat. Communities built on non-comparison thrive because each person brings their gifts without fear of being overshadowed. Collaboration replaces competition, and trust deepens. In the realm of creativity, non-comparison unlocks authenticity. Instead of trying to replicate what has already been praised, you create from your own truth. This originality flows not from striving to be unique, but from being real. Paradoxically, when you stop trying to stand out, you often produce the most authentic contributions. The healing power of non-comparison also extends to self-acceptance. When you are no longer grading yourself against others, you have room to embrace your flaws, mistakes, and imperfections without shame. Growth becomes exploration rather than competition. You can learn, adjust, and evolve without the heavy weight of judgment. Ultimately, non-comparison restores presence. The mind is no longer dragged into fantasies of being ahead or fears of being behind. It settles into now. In this presence, life feels whole, because it is no longer being measured against a shifting standard. The freedom that arises is profound, not the freedom of being better than others, but the freedom of not needing to be. The joy of enough is deepened and stabilized by non-comparison. Enoughness cannot survive in the shadow of rivalry, but it flourishes in the light of authenticity. When you release the lens of comparison, you see that life was never a race. Each person is walking their own path, and the beauty of yours can only be seen when you stop looking sideways. When the grip of comparison begins to loosen, another layer of the chase reveals itself, one even more hidden because it takes place entirely within. It is not about keeping up with others, nor about reaching for external markers of success. This chase happens in silence, inside the mind and heart, where we battle against anger, fear, grief, shame, and every part of ourselves we wish were different. It is the inner chase, the relentless attempt to push away what feels uncomfortable, to deny emotions we do not want to face, to outrun shadows we carry. Yet the harder we resist them, the more power they gain. The tendency to fight inner states is deeply ingrained. From an early age, many are taught to categorize emotions as good or bad, acceptable or shameful. Anger is condemned, grief is silenced, fear is mocked. Instead of learning to sit with these emotions, people learn to suppress, deny, or battle them. This internal struggle creates exhaustion because it is a war that cannot be won. Emotions pushed down return stronger. Feelings denied grow louder in the silence. What begins as resistance soon becomes chasing relief, chasing control, chasing freedom from parts of yourself you cannot escape. Anger is often the clearest example. People feel its heat rising and immediately resist. They judge themselves for being angry, fearing it makes them unworthy. They try to push it down or distract themselves. But suppressed anger does not disappear. It festers, leaking out in passive aggression, resentment, or explosive outbursts. The more you chase the state of not being angry, the more entangled you become with the anger itself. Healing begins not with rejection, but with awareness, acknowledging its presence, understanding its root, and allowing it to move through without clinging. Fear follows a similar pattern. Many try to outrun fear by over-preparing, controlling circumstances, or avoiding risks. But fear thrives in avoidance. It grows larger in the dark. The chase to eliminate fear ensures its persistence, because the very act of trying to eradicate it tells the nervous system that fear is a monster. By meeting fear gently, observing its sensations in the body, and questioning its stories, the grip loosens. Freedom comes not from never feeling fear, but from not needing to chase safety at all costs. Grief is perhaps the most difficult to face. In many cultures, grief is hurried along with the unspoken expectation that people move on quickly. This creates an inner chase to reach closure, to stop feeling the ache of loss. Yet, grief is not a problem to solve, but a process to honor. The attempt to bypass it only prolongs it. When grief is allowed space, it transforms into love, because grief is love with no place to go. By resisting it, you block the healing it carries. By surrendering, you allow grief to soften and integrate into the fabric of your life. Shame and guilt also fuel the inner chase. Many spend years trying to prove themselves worthy, to compensate for mistakes, to bury their sense of not being enough. This chase often drives ambition, perfectionism, or people-pleasing. Yet no amount of external validation erases inner shame. The harder you chase worthiness, the further it slips away, because worth was never missing to begin with. Healing shame requires meeting it directly, offering compassion where criticism once lived, and recognizing that being human means being imperfect. The inner chase also shows up in the pursuit of constant positivity. Many believe they must feel happy, calm, or peaceful at all times to be spiritual or successful. When difficult emotions arise, they feel like failures. This creates a cycle of self-attack where the mind chases positivity while condemning negativity. But real peace is not the absence of pain, it is the capacity to hold pain without being overwhelmed. By accepting the full spectrum of emotions, you free yourself from the exhausting chase of constant cheerfulness. Meditation reveals the truth of the inner chase clearly. Sit in silence and watch the mind. You will notice how quickly it resists discomfort, shifting in the chair, creating distractions, generating stories. The practice is not to eradicate these reactions, but to notice them without attachment. With patience, the mind learns that it can survive discomfort without running. This is the beginning of freedom, not control over the inner landscape, but peace within it. The inner chase is particularly damaging because it splits the self. You begin to see parts of yourself as enemies. The shadow is formed from all the aspects you reject: anger, jealousy, grief, fear. But the more you exile them, the more they sabotage from the dark. Integration comes not from defeating shadows, but from welcoming them home. By acknowledging, yes, this anger is part of me, yes, this fear belongs here too, you end the civil war within. In that acceptance, the energy tied up in resistance is released into vitality. This shift requires courage. Facing shadows is uncomfortable because it means confronting pain you have avoided for years. Yet every time you sit with discomfort without fleeing, you strengthen resilience. You learn that emotions are waves, rising and falling, not permanent prisons. The fear that they will consume you fades when you see that they always pass. The act of staying present becomes the medicine. Compassion is essential in this process. Without compassion, awareness becomes another form of judgment. You may notice anger and immediately criticize yourself for it. True healing arises when you notice with kindness, I see my anger. I understand it is here. I will breathe with it. Compassion turns shadows into teachers rather than enemies. Anger teaches about boundaries. Fear teaches about vulnerability. Grief teaches about love. Each shadow, when embraced, reveals wisdom hidden within. The body plays a crucial role in ending the inner chase. Emotions are not only thoughts, but physical sensations. By tuning into the body, feeling the tightness in the chest, the knot in the stomach, the heaviness in the shoulders, you allow emotions to complete their cycle. Many emotions persist because they are blocked physically by resistance. Breathwork, mindful movement, or simply sitting with sensations allows energy to move through, dissolving the need to chase them away. The cultural obsession with performance makes the inner chase harder to see. People are rewarded for suppressing emotions, for presenting strength while hiding pain. This reinforces the belief that difficult emotions must be defeated. But true strength lies not in suppression, but in authenticity. A leader who can admit fear, a friend who can show grief, a parent who can acknowledge anger, these are signs of courage, not weakness. By breaking the pattern of suppression, you not only heal yourself, but also give permission for others to do the same. Spiritual teachings echo this truth. The Buddha spoke of suffering arising not from pain itself, but from resistance to pain. When you stop resisting, suffering loosens. Rumi wrote of welcoming every emotion as a guest, opening the door to joy, sorrow, and fear alike. These teachings remind us that the inner chase is not necessary. Peace is not achieved by defeating emotions, but by embracing them as part of the human experience. Healing from the inner chase also reshapes relationships. When you accept your own shadows, you become less reactive to others. You no longer attack someone else's anger because you have made peace with your own. You no longer fear another's grief because you understand its depth. This acceptance builds empathy and deepens connection. Relationships thrive not on perfection, but on the courage to hold each other's shadows with compassion. The practice of ending the inner chase is ongoing. Each time you feel the urge to suppress or run, you pause. Each time you meet discomfort with presence rather than resistance, you weaken the old habit. Over time, the mind learns that nothing within needs to be feared. The shadows lose their sharpness, not because they disappear, but because they are no longer enemies. The freedom that arises is profound. Energy once wasted on battling yourself becomes available for living. The constant tension of resistance dissolves into ease. You no longer chase inner perfection. You rest in inner wholeness. Happiness emerges naturally, not as the absence of shadows, but as the peace of embracing them. The chase ends, and the self becomes whole again. When the war with your inner shadows begins to ease, another doorway opens, one that feels even more unfamiliar. Beneath anger, beneath fear, beneath grief, there is a silence that cannot be chased away. Many mistake this silence for emptiness in the bleak sense, a void that feels cold or meaningless. But in Buddhist understanding, emptiness or shunyata is not a lack. It is spaciousness, an open field where joy arises without effort. Learning to meet this emptiness without fear is to discover happiness that does not depend on conditions. The human mind often fears emptiness because it has been trained to equate fullness with meaning. A full schedule means importance. A full bank account means security. A full house means love. When space appears, whether in time, thought, or feeling, the ego interprets it as loss. Yet, this interpretation is mistaken. What is absent in emptiness is not life, but clinging. It is the grasping that drops away, leaving behind an open horizon. In daily experience, small glimpses of this can be felt. After completing a task, before the next begins, there is a pause. After an exhale, before the inhale returns, there is a gap. After a wave of emotion passes, there is a moment of stillness. These moments are often overlooked, filled immediately with distraction. But if you attend to them, you sense their richness. They are not barren, but alive, like a clear sky uncluttered by clouds. Shunyata points to the insight that everything lacks fixed essence. Objects, people, even the self, are not solid entities, but processes, interconnected and ever-changing. This recognition dissolves the illusion of separateness. When you stop clinging to rigid identities, mine, yours, success, failure, you discover freedom. The spaciousness of emptiness allows life to flow without the suffocating weight of permanence. This perspective also reshapes how suffering is met. Painful experiences often feel unbearable because the mind believes them to be solid, eternal, defining. But when seen through emptiness, they are recognized as temporary, dependent on conditions, without inherent weight. Grief, fear, anger, All arise, shift, and pass. They are not fixed prisons, but moving patterns. Emptiness allows you to hold them lightly, knowing they do not define the whole of existence. Emptiness is also the field where compassion grows. When you see that no self is fixed, you also see that no other being is isolated. Interdependence becomes clear. Your breath relies on trees, your food on countless hands, your well-being on countless relationships. This dissolves the illusion of separateness that fuels greed and fear. From this recognition, compassion arises naturally because harming others becomes the same as harming yourself. The joy of emptiness is subtle, unlike the rush of acquisition. It is not the high of pleasure, but the relief of release. Think of the lightness after setting down a heavy bag you carried too long. Nothing new is added. The weight is simply gone. Emptiness is the same. Joy not from accumulation, but from freedom. When you rest in it, life feels spacious, open, and uncluttered. Meditation is the practice ground for this discovery. As thoughts and emotions arise, you watch them dissolve. What remains is not nothingness, but awareness itself, clear, open, expansive. This awareness is not grasping, not judging, not clinging. It is the spaciousness in which everything appears and disappears. Over time, you realize this awareness is always present, beneath the noise of thought, beneath the drama of craving. The fear of emptiness comes from misunderstanding. Many equate it with meaninglessness. But shunyata is the opposite of despair. It is the space that allows meaning to exist at all. Just as silence makes music possible, emptiness makes joy possible. Without space, life would be suffocating. Emptiness is not the absence of life. It is the condition that allows life to be experienced fully. This insight transforms relationships as well. When you stop clinging to rigid roles, partner, parent, child, leader, you allow others to breathe. You no longer trap them in fixed expectations. You meet them freshly, moment by moment, allowing connection to evolve. This spaciousness in relationships feels like freedom, because love is no longer a cage, but an open field. Emptiness also brings humility. When you realize that even your sense of self is not fixed, the need to defend it softens. Insults lose their sting because there is no solid identity to protect. Praise loses its grip because it does not inflate a permanent self. This humility is not weakness, it is strength rooted in freedom. The less you cling to a fixed self, the more resilient you become. The practice of resting in emptiness also brings clarity. When the mind is cluttered with clinging, perception is distorted. You see not what is, but what you want or fear it to be. Emptiness clears these distortions. In spacious awareness, things are seen as they are, impermanent, interconnected, fluid. This clarity allows wiser choices because decisions are no longer driven by grasping but by understanding. In the context of ambition, emptiness is deeply liberating. You can still set goals and work toward them, but they no longer define your worth. Success and failure are recognized as conditions arising and passing, not as permanent verdicts. This makes effort lighter, creativity freer, and setbacks less devastating. Life becomes play rather than battle, because nothing is fixed in stone. On the level of the body, emptiness is felt as relaxation. The tension of clinging creates contraction, tight muscles, shallow breath, restless movement. When clinging drops, the body opens. Breath deepens, posture softens, energy flows. The spaciousness of emptiness is not just a concept, but a physical experience of ease. The gift of emptiness also dissolves fear of death. Fear arises from the belief in a fixed self that must end, but when you see that there was never a fixed self to begin with, death is no longer a final loss. Life is a flow of conditions, endlessly transforming. What you call self is simply one configuration in this flow. When it shifts, the spacious field remains. This recognition brings profound peace, because you no longer cling to permanence where none exists. The practice of embracing emptiness is not an escape from life, but a deeper entry into it. By letting go of fixed clinging, you become more intimate with every moment. You taste food more fully, listen more deeply, connect more authentically. Paradoxically, emptiness makes life richer because it removes the barriers of ego and expectation. Happiness rests here, not in accumulation, but in spaciousness. It is the happiness of being unburdened, of walking lightly, of living without needing to grasp. Emptiness is not bleak, it is luminous. It is the clear sky behind every storm, the open field beyond every wall. To rest in it is to know a joy that does not depend on circumstances, a joy that is steady, subtle, and free. When the truth of emptiness is no longer feared, but welcomed as spaciousness, another dimension quietly reveals itself. In the absence of clinging and in the presence of openness, silence becomes visible, not just the absence of noise, but a deep stillness that extends both within and around you. This silence is often overlooked because striving drowns it out. The constant hum of plans, worries, and ambitions fills every corner of the mind. Yet, when striving subsides, even for a moment, silence steps forward. Far from being emptiness in a bleak sense, it is the fertile ground where happiness naturally takes root. Silence has a texture that words rarely capture. It is not simply quiet in the ears, but stillness in the heart. It is the absence of inner argument, the release of constant commentary. When you rest in silence, there is no need to prove, defend, or achieve. The chase ceases, and in its place, a profound peace begins to bloom. This peace is not added from the outside. It was always here, concealed by the noise of striving. Striving is often praised as virtuous. People admire those who hustle endlessly, who fill every moment with effort. Yet underneath, striving carries restlessness. It suggests that the present is insufficient, that happiness will come only with more effort, more achievement, more doing. Silence interrupts this narrative. It whispers that nothing is missing, that peace is already available in the space where striving falls away. This stillness is not passive. It is not apathy or neglect. It is alive, alert, and receptive. Think of the calm before dawn, when the world holds its breath. In that quiet, every sound, every movement is vivid. Silence sharpens perception, allowing you to meet life directly. When the mind is no longer consumed with striving, awareness opens like a wide field, and within that openness, happiness arises naturally. One way this silence reveals itself is in the pause between thoughts. Just as there is space between desires, there is space between mental chatter. Usually, the mind rushes so quickly from one thought to the next that these gaps are missed. But with practice, you begin to notice the stillness between. In those intervals, there is no striving, no identity, no burden, only awareness. This awareness itself is happiness, because it is free. Environmental silence also plays a role. In a world saturated with noise, traffic, screens, notifications, the nervous system rarely rests. Seeking silence in outer spaces, whether in nature, in quiet rooms, or in intentional moments without devices, allows the body and mind to recalibrate. In the hush of a forest, in the stillness of early morning, in the absence of constant stimulation, you feel a return to your natural rhythm. This outer silence mirrors the inner silence waiting within. The healing power of silence is evident in the body. When striving subsides, tension dissolves. Muscles soften, breath deepens, heartbeat steadies. The body recognizes safety, not in effort, but in stillness. This state of rest is where healing occurs. Constant striving keeps the body in survival mode. Silence restores it to balance. Over time, you begin to see that silence is not a luxury, but a necessity for health and wholeness. Silence also transforms relationships. When you are not striving to be heard, to be right, or to impress, you can truly listen. Conversations gain depth when silence is allowed to hold space between words. Pauses are no longer uncomfortable, but fertile, allowing meaning to settle. In these silent spaces, connection grows stronger than in endless talking. Love is often communicated not in words, but in quiet presence. Another gift of silence is clarity. Striving fills the mind with noise, plans, comparisons, doubts. But when silence is honored, truth rises to the surface. Decisions that once felt clouded become clear. Priorities align naturally. This clarity is not forced. It is revealed when the noise settles. Just as muddy water clears when left undisturbed, the mind clears in silence. Silence also offers refuge from the tyranny of time. Striving is always future-oriented. The next step, the next achievement, the next stage. Silence anchors you in the present. In stillness, there is no rush, no before or after, only now. This shift is liberating because it dissolves the anxiety of always needing to be somewhere else. Happiness unfolds in this timeless awareness where nothing is lacking. The practice of silence is deceptively simple. It may mean setting aside moments each day to sit without distraction. It may mean walking without headphones, eating without conversation, or simply pausing before responding. These small practices cultivate familiarity with stillness. At first, silence may feel unsettling because the mind is addicted to striving. But gradually, it becomes a sanctuary, a place you long to return to. Silence also dismantles the illusion of control. Striving often masks the fear of uncertainty, the belief that if you keep moving, you can control outcomes. Silence reveals that control is limited, yet this is not frightening. It is freeing. By surrendering the illusion of control, you relax into trust. Life flows without your constant interference, and you discover that peace does not require domination. In creativity, silence is indispensable. Ideas do not arise in noise, but in stillness. When the mind rests, inspiration enters. Writers, artists, and thinkers often find their breakthroughs not in frantic effort, but in quiet reflection. Silence creates the conditions for originality because it clears space for the unconscious to speak. Striving may produce quantity, but silence births depth. On a spiritual level, silence is the essence of practice. It is the ground beneath meditation, prayer, and contemplation. Words point to truth, but silence reveals it. In silence, the boundaries of self begin to soften, and awareness expands beyond individual identity. This expansion is not an achievement, but a recognition of what was always present beneath the noise. The ego fears silence because it cannot perform there. In silence, there is no audience, no validation, no story. But this is its gift. Silence dismantles the ego's stage and reveals the self that does not need to prove or strive. In this revelation, happiness is uncovered, not as an accomplishment, but as a natural state. Silence beyond striving is not distant or rare. It is available in every pause, every breath, every moment of stillness. The challenge is not to create it, but to stop covering it with noise. Once you allow silence to be, you see that it was always waiting, and in that silence, happiness rests, steady, subtle, and unshakable. When the power of silence begins to reshape your way of living, a deeper illusion becomes easier to see. Striving is not only about noise and constant effort. It is also tied to a story many carry about life itself, the story that existence must follow a fixed timeline. From early on, people are told that life is a race with stages to complete and boxes to check. Education, career, relationships, family, retirement. This linear script is so deeply ingrained that few question it. Yet it quietly robs people of contentment because it convinces them they are always either behind or racing ahead. Letting go of this timeline is one of the most radical freedoms. The myth of achievement works because it seems orderly. It promises certainty. If you reach the next milestone, you will feel secure, successful, and happy. But this promise is hollow. Each milestone reached reveals another waiting. Graduations lead to jobs, jobs to promotions, promotions to new responsibilities. Marriage leads to expectations of children, children to expectations of status, and so on. The cycle never ends. What was once celebrated becomes ordinary, and the line of achievement extends further. The timeline becomes a treadmill that never stops. This belief that life is a race creates subtle suffering. Those who feel behind experience anxiety, shame, or envy. Those who feel ahead fear losing their lead. Those who meet every milestone often discover emptiness because ticking boxes does not fill the soul. The entire framework of measurement ensures dissatisfaction because it places value not in presence, but in progress. Unhooking from this timeline does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means seeing through the illusion that life must follow a single script. Each person's path is unique, unfolding at its own rhythm. By dropping comparison to an external calendar, you rediscover freedom to live in alignment with your truth rather than society's checklist. The cultural obsession with achievement timeline is reinforced by constant comparison. Social media amplifies it, presenting curated milestones of others' lives as though they were the standard. Engagements, promotions, vacations, and accomplishments are displayed as evidence of progress. Yet, what is rarely shown are the struggles, doubts, and detours. Believing in these curated timelines deepens restlessness and obscures the richness of your own journey. This myth also distorts the meaning of aging. In many cultures, youth is idolized as the time of possibility, while later life is framed as decline. Yet wisdom traditions teach that every stage carries its own gifts. By unhooking from the achievement timeline, you can see aging not as falling behind, but as unfolding into depth. Contentment arises from honoring the season you are in, rather than clinging to the myth that you should be somewhere else. Letting go of the race reshapes ambition. You can still set goals, but they are no longer measured against others or against an external script. Instead, they emerge from alignment with values and inner callings. This makes achievement lighter because success is no longer tied to deadlines or competition. The process itself becomes meaningful, regardless of the calendar. Unhooking also transforms relationships. When you stop measuring your life against milestones, you stop pressuring others to meet them. Partnerships are no longer judged by whether they fit a conventional timeline. Friendships are valued for depth rather than for how they compare to others' paths. Children are supported in their unique rhythms instead of being forced to match societal expectations. This creates relationships rooted in authenticity rather than performance. The nervous system also benefits. The stress of constantly measuring progress keeps the body in tension. You carry an invisible weight, always asking whether you are on time or falling behind. Releasing this weight allows the body to relax. Breath deepens, shoulders soften, and energy flows into the present moment rather than being consumed by imaginary deadlines. Spiritual traditions echo this wisdom. Zen teachings remind practitioners to see each step as complete, not as a means to an end. Taoist philosophy speaks of moving with the flow of life rather than against it. These perspectives dissolve the linear obsession and reveal contentment that is timeless. The practice is not to reach a future state, but to be fully alive now. Practical ways to loosen the grip of the achievement timeline include questioning inherited beliefs. Ask yourself, whose milestones am I chasing? Who decided this order? Often you will find that the timeline was never yours, but imposed by family, culture, or peers. Recognizing this opens the door to living by your own rhythm. Another practice is to honor pauses. The achievement timeline condemns pauses as wasted time, yet pauses are fertile ground. Taking a break from career, from striving, or from constant goals is not failure. It is space for renewal, reflection, and redirection. By valuing pauses, you reclaim time from the grip of false urgency. Gratitude again becomes a tool here. By noticing the fullness of the present, you weaken the compulsion to race ahead. Gratitude shifts focus from what is missing to what is already here. This practice dismantles the illusion that happiness waits at the next milestone and shows that joy is available now, independent of external timing. Letting go of the timeline also invites humility. You realize that much of life unfolds beyond your control. Illness, opportunity, loss, and surprise often disrupt plans. Clinging to a rigid script only deepens suffering when life inevitably deviates. By embracing uncertainty, you free yourself from the violence of expectation. Contentment arises not from control, but from adaptability. This shift also changes how you measure worth. When tied to milestones, worth feels fragile, dependent on external validation. When rooted in presence, worth becomes intrinsic. You no longer need to prove yourself through achievements or timelines. Your existence itself is sufficient. This recognition stabilizes self-esteem, making it resilient to external fluctuations. In creativity, this freedom is essential. Great works rarely emerge on strict timelines. Inspiration follows its own rhythm, requiring patience and openness. By unhooking from deadlines of comparison, you allow ideas to mature naturally. The result is not only more authentic work, but also more joy in the creative process. The gift of dropping the race is timeless contentment. Life is no longer seen as a ladder to climb, but as a field to walk. Each step is complete in itself, not a means to another. This contentment does not deny growth, but refuses to chain it to deadlines. Growth becomes organic, guided by curiosity rather than pressure. Unhooking from the timeline of achievement allows you to step out of competition and into presence. It allows you to see that there is no finish line waiting to validate your worth. There is only this unfolding moment, whole and sufficient. In releasing the myth of the race, you rediscover freedom. Not the freedom to finish first, but the freedom to walk your own path with peace. When the pressure of the timeline dissolves and life is no longer a race, what arises is the possibility of a new way of seeing. Without the weight of milestones, without the comparison of who is ahead or behind, a deeper question surfaces. How do we meet this moment? The restless habit of focusing on what is missing often clouds perception, leaving the present feeling thin, unsatisfying, and incomplete. Yet when the lens shifts from lack to presence, the very texture of life changes. What once seemed ordinary begins to glow with sufficiency, and what once felt empty reveals itself as whole. Lack is a learned lens. From advertisements to cultural stories, the message is constant. You are incomplete until you acquire more, until you achieve more, until you become more. This conditioning trains the mind to scan for deficits, to notice what is absent rather than what is present. Over time, this becomes second nature, so automatic that people forget there is another way of seeing. But lack is not the truth of existence. It is a perspective shaped by habit and culture. Presence, by contrast, reveals what has been here all along. The shift from lack to presence is not about denying difficulties or pretending life is perfect. It is about anchoring attention in what is already available rather than being consumed by what is missing. When you focus on presence, you discover richness in simplicity. The breath moving steadily, the body carrying you, the food on the table, the voices of loved ones, the stability of the ground beneath your feet. None of these erase life's challenges, but they soften the grip of scarcity. They remind you that even amid imperfection, abundance exists. Contentment emerges naturally from this shift. Contentment is not laziness or resignation. It is an active engagement with what is here. It allows you to act, create, and pursue goals without being enslaved by them. In contentment, ambition becomes expression rather than desperation. Relationships become spaces of appreciation rather than arenas of demand. Even ordinary routines gain depth because presence reveals details that lack ignores. The practice of contentment requires awareness of how lack shows up. It may appear as envy when others succeed, as disappointment when things do not match expectation, as restlessness in quiet moments. Each time lack arises, it pulls you out of presence, convincing you that happiness is elsewhere. The alchemy begins when you notice this pull and redirect attention to what is here. This is not a single decision, but a repeated practice, slowly retraining the mind to see sufficiency rather than scarcity. Gratitude is one of the most powerful tools for this transformation. Gratitude shifts attention deliberately to presence. By naming what you appreciate, you highlight abundance where the mind once saw absence. Over time, this practice rewires perception. The brain learns to scan for gifts rather than deficits. Gratitude does not require extraordinary events. It thrives on the ordinary. A warm cup of tea, a kind word, a quiet breath can all become anchors of sufficiency when gratitude is cultivated. Contentment also grows through simplicity. When life is cluttered with excess, too many possessions, too many commitments, too much noise, the mind struggles to rest in presence. Simplicity clears space, making what is here more visible. This does not mean deprivation, but clarity. Owning fewer things allows you to appreciate each one more fully. Committing to fewer activities allows you to engage more deeply. Simplicity is a form of respect for presence because it prevents life from being buried under layers of distraction. Relationships reveal another dimension of this alchemy. Lack often shows up as constant expectation, wanting others to fill your emptiness, to act differently, to provide what you believe is missing. This pressure erodes intimacy. When you shift to presence, you begin to appreciate others as they are, rather than as you wish them to be. Love becomes less about demand and more about recognition. Connection deepens because it is grounded in appreciation rather than scarcity. The body plays a role in this practice as well. Lack is often felt as tension, a tightening in the chest, a restless movement, a shallow breath. Presence, by contrast, relaxes the body. When you focus on what is here, on breath, sensation, movement, the body softens. This physical shift reinforces mental clarity, creating a feedback loop of calm. Practicing presence through the body, whether by walking mindfully, eating slowly, or resting in silence, turns contentment into an embodied experience rather than an abstract idea. The shift from lack to presence also transforms creativity. When driven by lack, creativity becomes a chase for recognition or proof of worth. But when rooted in presence, creativity becomes play, exploration, and expression. You create not to fix a deficit, but to give form to the richness already within. This leads to authenticity and joy in the process, regardless of outcome. Contentment reshapes ambition in a similar way. Goals can still inspire, but they no longer carry the weight of identity. You can pursue them with dedication while knowing that peace does not depend on them. Success becomes a gift, not a condition for happiness. Failure becomes less threatening because it does not erase sufficiency. This balanced ambition is sustainable because it is not fueled by desperation, but by presence. The practice of contentment also extends into time. Lack pulls you into the future, where happiness always waits at the next milestone. Presence anchors you in the now, where life is actually lived. When you shift into presence, time feels fuller. Even small moments stretch with richness because they are not bypassed in the rush toward something else. Waiting in line, sitting in traffic, or resting in silence all become opportunities for awareness rather than frustrations. On a collective level, the practice of presence challenges systems built on lack. Consumer economies thrive on convincing people that they are not enough. Advertising, social media, and cultural pressures reinforce the message that contentment is impossible without more. Choosing presence disrupts this cycle. It frees individuals from manipulation and reduces the harm caused by overconsumption. Practicing contentment is therefore not only personal liberation, but also a contribution to collective healing. Spiritual traditions affirm this truth in many forms. Buddhism teaches that craving is the root of suffering, and that peace arises when craving subsides. Stoicism teaches that happiness is found in aligning with what is within your control and accepting what is not. Taoism emphasizes harmony with the flow of life, not resistance to it. Across traditions, the core insight remains. Contentment arises not from accumulation, but from presence. The alchemy of contentment is not instant. It requires daily practice because the pull of lack is strong. Each time you notice scarcity thinking and gently redirect to presence, you strengthen the habit of sufficiency. Over time, the texture of life changes. What once felt thin and restless begins to feel rich and steady. The joy of enoughness becomes natural, not forced. This transformation is not about settling for less, but about waking up to what has always been here. Lack narrows vision to what is missing. Presence widens vision to what is abundant. When this shift takes root, every day offers quiet treasures. Contentment is not the end of desire, but the freedom to live without being ruled by it. In turning lack into presence, you rediscover life itself, not as something to chase, but as something already whole. When the lens shifts from lack to presence, life takes on a richness that cannot be measured by possessions or milestones. Yet even in this clarity, one of the deepest forms of chasing still lingers, the chase for identity. It hides beneath roles, labels, and achievements, convincing you that who you are must be defined, displayed, and defended. This chase is subtle because it feels like self-discovery, but it is fueled by the same restlessness that drives all other forms of seeking. Letting go of this pursuit does not leave you empty. It frees you to experience life without conditions attached to who you think you must be. Identity begins as a survival tool. Children learn to define themselves through feedback. The clever one, the quiet one, the achiever, the helper. These roles offer safety and belonging, but over time, they harden into cages. The mind becomes invested in protecting and reinforcing these identities, fearing their collapse as though it were death itself. Yet identity is never fixed. It shifts with age, with context, with experience. The suffering comes not from having roles, but from clinging to them as the essence of who you are. The chase for identity shows up in careers where worth is measured by titles and achievements. Someone may devote decades to building an image of success, only to feel empty when the role changes or ends. In relationships, people cling to labels, spouse, parent, child, and feel lost when those labels no longer apply. Even in spirituality, seekers may attach to identities like meditator or healer, turning the path itself into another form of ego armor. Each time identity is chased, freedom is lost, because happiness becomes conditional on maintaining a fragile image. The nervous system mirrors this fragility. When identity is threatened through criticism, failure, or change, the body reacts as if under attack. Heart rate rises, muscles tighten, fear takes over. This is not because the self is truly in danger, but because the mind believes identity equals survival. By loosening attachment to identity, the body relaxes. Life's changes are no longer experienced as threats, but as natural movements. Letting go of the chase for identity does not mean erasing individuality. It means recognizing that roles are temporary garments, not the essence of being. You can wear them lightly, parent, teacher, artist, leader, without believing they define your worth. When the garment changes, your essence remains untouched. This perspective allows you to meet change with grace rather than fear. One way identity clinging limits happiness is through comparison. When your sense of self depends on being better, smarter, or more successful, every encounter becomes a competition. Peace is impossible because identity is always on trial. Dropping this chase releases you from constant defense. You no longer need to prove or protect. You can simply be, allowing relationships and experiences to unfold without the heavy weight of self-image. Another form of identity chasing is perfectionism. The mind creates an ideal version of who you should be and measures every action against it. This creates constant dissatisfaction because reality can never match the ideal. Letting go means recognizing that you are not a project to be perfected, but a presence to be lived. Growth still happens, but it is rooted in curiosity rather than self-criticism. The practice of loosening identity can begin with small acts of release. Notice when you feel the need to announce your achievements, defend your choices, or maintain an image. Ask, who am I trying to convince? What would happen if I allowed myself to simply exist without explanation? These moments reveal how much energy is spent on maintaining identity. By letting them go, you reclaim that energy for presence. Meditation offers a direct experience of identity's fluidity. In stillness, thoughts of self arise, memories, labels, judgments, but with awareness, you see they are passing clouds. Beneath them is pure awareness, not tied to any role. Resting in this awareness reveals that identity is a tool, not a truth. You are not confined to a single story. You are the space in which all stories appear and dissolve. Relationships also transform when identity chasing ends. Instead of needing to play roles to gain approval, you show up authentically. You no longer demand others fulfill roles for your sake, allowing them to be free as well. This creates deeper connection because love is no longer conditional on performance. It is rooted in presence, not in identity. Work and ambition are also liberated. When identity is not tied to career, success becomes an expression rather than a necessity. You can pursue goals without desperation because failure does not erase your worth. This makes risk-taking less frightening and creativity more genuine. Identity no longer dictates your choices. Values and curiosity guide them instead. The release of identity also brings resilience. When roles change, as they inevitably do, you are not shattered. Retirement, breakups, relocations, or health changes no longer strip you of who you are, because who you are was never confined to roles. This resilience brings peace because life's shifts are met with openness rather than panic. Spiritual traditions highlight this freedom. Buddhism teaches non-self, the recognition that clinging to identity is the root of suffering. Taoism speaks of flowing with life rather than fixing yourself in rigid roles. Even in psychology, modern research shows that flexible self-concepts correlate with well-being, while rigid identities increase stress. Across cultures and disciplines, the message is the same. Happiness grows when identity is held lightly. The fear of dropping identity often comes from the belief that without labels, you will be nothing. Yet the opposite is true. By releasing clinging, you discover spaciousness. Without the burden of defending an image, you feel lighter, freer, more present. You are not nothing. You are openness itself. This openness is where joy flows without condition. Contentment deepens when identity chasing ends. Life no longer needs to validate you. A quiet day is not a failure because worth is not measured by productivity. A mistake is not a collapse because identity is not fragile. You live with a steadiness that chasing cannot provide. Happiness becomes less about becoming and more about being. The chase for identity is subtle, but it is also one of the most exhausting. By letting it go, you dissolve a weight that has been carried unconsciously for years. The energy once used to defend, prove, and compare is released into presence. Life becomes more intimate, more authentic, and more peaceful. This freedom is not dramatic, but it is profound. The freedom of no longer needing to be anything other than what you are, here and now. When the weight of identity begins to fall away, something unexpected arises in its place. Lightness. Without the burden of defending roles, proving worth, or clinging to labels, space opens for a new way of moving through the world. That space is playful, unforced, alive. Life no longer feels like a test to pass or a conquest to win, but like a dance unfolding in real time. This playful dimension of non-chasing is not frivolous or shallow. It is a profound expression of freedom where joy and wisdom meet naturally. Play is often misunderstood as something reserved for children, as if seriousness were the hallmark of adulthood. Yet play is not immaturity. It is openness. It is the ability to meet life without rigid agendas, to explore without demanding outcomes, to enjoy without needing possession. In childhood, this comes naturally, but as people grow older, chasing replaces play, responsibilities, competition, and identity harden perception. Recovering the capacity for play is not regression. It is awakening to a freedom that was never lost, only obscured. Non-chasing makes play possible because chasing suffocates spontaneity. When the mind is consumed with grasping for goals, it cannot relax into the present moment. Every action becomes a means to an end, leaving no room for joy in the action itself. When chasing falls away, attention returns to what is happening now. A walk becomes more than a way to reach a destination. It becomes an unfolding experience of sights, sounds, and sensations. Work becomes more than a ladder to climb. It becomes a creative flow. Playfulness arises not from escape, but from being fully alive to what is here. Play also transforms relationships. In chasing, interactions are burdened with expectation, wanting others to validate, to provide, to complete. But when playfulness is present, relationships lighten. Conversations carry laughter, not just information. Conflicts soften because they are not approached as battles, but as opportunities to learn together. Even silence between people becomes less heavy, more comfortable, because there is no demand to prove or perform. Play brings warmth where rigidity once lived. In creativity, playfulness is essential. The greatest art, music, and innovation often come not from pressure, but from exploration without fear. When you approach creation with play, mistakes are no longer failures. They are experiments, openings to new possibilities. The energy shifts from striving to discovering. This freedom invites originality, because true creativity cannot be forced. It blossoms when the mind feels safe to explore without judgment. Play also reshapes ambition. Dropping the chase does not mean abandoning goals. It means approaching them with lightness. Instead of gripping tightly, you engage with curiosity. Success becomes an expression of joy rather than a requirement for worth. Failure becomes less threatening because it is part of the dance. This playful engagement makes effort sustainable because it is fueled by presence rather than desperation. The body, too, reflects the shift into play. Chasing tightens muscles, quickens breath, and creates heaviness. Playfulness loosens the body, bringing ease and fluidity. Movements become expressive rather than mechanical. Even ordinary actions, stretching, cooking, walking, carry a rhythm of enjoyment. The nervous system settles and energy is freed. Happiness is not postponed. It is lived in the moment through embodied play. Spiritual practice itself benefits from playfulness. Meditation and mindfulness are often approached with seriousness, as though they were duties to perform correctly. Yet when play enters, practice becomes lighter and more effective. Sitting in meditation does not mean fighting thoughts. It means observing with curiosity, like watching clouds drift. Mindfulness is not about perfection, but about exploring awareness with openness. This playful approach prevents practice from becoming another chase and allows peace to arise naturally. The wisdom of play is echoed in many traditions. Zen masters often used humor and paradox to awaken students, reminding them not to take even enlightenment too seriously. Taoist teachings emphasize flow, spontaneity, and alignment with the natural rhythms of life. Indigenous traditions honor play as a way of bonding, healing, and teaching. Across cultures, play is recognized not as trivial but as sacred, a gateway to truth. Play also dissolves fear. Much fear arises from treating life as a high-stakes game where every mistake is catastrophic. But when life is approached as play, fear softens. You begin to see that missteps are part of the dance, not signs of failure. This shift creates resilience. You recover more quickly because the weight of perfection no longer crushes you. Courage grows naturally because exploration feels safe when outcomes are not absolute. The practice of play can begin with small acts. Singing while you cook, dancing to music alone in your room, telling a joke during a tense moment. These small gestures reawaken the spirit of play. Over time, playfulness expands into every aspect of life. Meetings, chores, and even challenges become lighter when approached with curiosity and openness. The world becomes less a battlefield and more a playground of discovery. Play does not deny suffering. Life includes pain, loss, and struggle. But even here, play offers resilience. Humor in dark times can soften despair. A playful attitude toward mistakes can turn setbacks into lessons. Play does not erase suffering, but it allows you to carry it with more lightness. It prevents heaviness from defining your entire experience. The playful dimension of non-chasing restores balance. Where seriousness can narrow perception, play opens it. Where grasping creates rigidity, play creates flexibility. It reminds you that happiness is not a prize at the end of struggle, but a rhythm woven into the way you move through life. To rediscover play is to rediscover freedom, the freedom to live without the constant weight of needing to prove, to chase, to conquer. Life as a dance is not metaphor alone. It is a lived reality when you stop moving as though every step must lead somewhere else. In play, the step itself is enough. In play, happiness is not postponed. It is already here, moving with you, light on its feet, waiting to be noticed. When playfulness begins to color the way you meet life, seriousness loses its grip. The dance of non-chasing shows that joy can arise when you are no longer burdened by proving or striving. Yet, even in this lightness, another habit often lingers, the quiet tendency to bargain with reality. The mind says, "I will be happy if things go my way, if conditions line up, if people behave as they should." This constant negotiation with what is becomes another chase, subtle but exhausting. The freedom comes when you stop bargaining altogether, when you allow reality to be as it is without conditions. Negotiation with reality takes many forms. It appears in the thought that life owes you fairness, that suffering is a mistake, that happiness requires circumstances to meet your demands. It shows up in complaints about the weather, resentment toward others' choices, frustration at your own imperfections. Each negotiation carries the hidden message that peace cannot exist until life changes. But life does not bend to every demand. The habit of bargaining ensures dissatisfaction because reality keeps showing up as itself. This constant bargaining is rooted in control. The mind clings to the belief that if it argues hard enough with reality, it will win. But reality is unmoved by argument. The rain falls whether or not you approve. People act from their own conditions, whether or not it pleases you. Time passes whether or not you are ready. Each resistance drains energy. Instead of resting in the flow, you stand against it, exhausting yourself in a fight that cannot be won. Radical acceptance is not resignation. It is not passive or indifferent. It is the recognition that this moment, as it stands, is already here. You can resist endlessly, or you can meet it directly. Only by accepting what is can you respond wisely. Acceptance does not mean you never act for change. It means your actions arise from clarity rather than denial. When you stop negotiating with reality, energy, once wasted on resistance, becomes available for meaningful response. Relationships reveal this dynamic clearly. Many conflicts arise not from actual harm, but from the refusal to accept others as they are. You argue in silence with their habits, their words, their ways of being. You say to yourself, they should be different. But this is a negotiation with reality. The person before you is who they are in this moment. When you accept this truth, you can respond with love, with boundaries, or with distance, but you stop exhausting yourself with futile bargaining. The body also reflects the strain of resisting reality. Muscles tighten, jaw clenches, stomach knots. The nervous system reads every argument with what is as danger. By practicing acceptance, the body relaxes. Breathing deepens, tension eases, health improves. Peace becomes physical, not just mental. This shows that acceptance is not an abstract philosophy, but a practical medicine for the body and mind. Negotiating with reality also distorts time. You spend hours replaying the past, insisting it should have been different. You project into the future, demanding it unfold a certain way. Both are negotiations with what cannot be controlled. Acceptance brings you back to now. The past is unchangeable, the future uncertain, but the present is real and alive. When you stop bargaining with time, you find richness in this moment. The practice of acceptance can begin with small irritations. Notice when you resist the weather, traffic, or delays. Instead of fueling the argument, pause and breathe. Say, "This is what is." Feel the shift as energy is freed from resistance. Over time, this practice expands into larger challenges: loss, illness, disappointment. Acceptance does not erase pain, but it removes the second layer of suffering created by arguing with reality. Spiritual traditions highlight this truth. In Buddhism, suffering arises from craving for reality to be other than it is. In Stoicism, peace comes from aligning with what cannot be controlled. In Taoism, harmony flows from moving with the way of things rather than against them. Across traditions, the lesson is the same. Happiness is not found in controlling reality, but in opening to it. This acceptance also reshapes ambition. You can still set goals, but you no longer argue with the present until they are achieved. You act from sufficiency rather than lack. If obstacles arise, you meet them without resentment, adjusting as needed. Success and failure lose their sting because they are seen as movements of reality rather than verdicts on your worth. The mind fears acceptance because it confuses it with giving up. But acceptance is the ground of all effective action. Only when you see reality clearly can you act skillfully. Resisting what is blinds you, distorting perception with anger, fear, or denial. Acceptance clears the view. From there, change becomes possible, not through struggle, but through alignment. Non-chasing reaches its fullness in this practice. To stop negotiating with reality is to stop chasing an alternate version of life. It is to stand in what is, whole and unconditioned. In this space, happiness does not need to be earned or bargained for. It arises naturally because nothing blocks it. Happiness finds you when you no longer insist it must come through winning arguments with reality. It finds you in the pause after resistance drops, in the breath that softens, in the openness that follows surrender. It is not passive, not weak, but strong in its simplicity. Radical acceptance is the end of bargaining and the beginning of peace. When the habit of negotiating with reality begins to dissolve, there is a sense of release, a freedom from the constant inner argument about how life should be. Yet, even in that relief, the ego often finds new ways to keep the chase alive. One of the most subtle and deceptive forms it takes is the pursuit of self-improvement. Growth, on the surface, looks noble. It promises progress, transformation, and fulfillment. But when driven by restlessness and self-judgment, even growth can become another trap, an endless cycle of dissatisfaction disguised as virtue. The culture of self-improvement thrives because it appeals to both aspiration and insecurity. Books, courses, and programs tell you that, with enough effort, you can become more productive, more confident, more disciplined, more enlightened. There is nothing inherently wrong with learning or developing, but the hidden danger is the belief that you are not enough until you reach some imagined version of yourself. This belief makes growth conditional and heavy, turning what could be liberating into yet another chase. The subtlety lies in the fact that self-improvement often feels empowering. You are making changes, setting goals, moving forward. Yet if you look closely, the motivation may come not from joy, but from fear. Fear of inadequacy, fear of falling behind, fear of being unworthy as you are. When fear fuels growth, the process never ends, because no achievement satisfies for long. The mind instantly demands more. What began as an effort to evolve becomes a treadmill of self-rejection. This cycle drains energy. Constantly striving to improve leaves you restless because you are always measuring yourself against an ideal. The nervous system interprets this as ongoing threat, keeping the body in tension. Sleep is disrupted, creativity stifled, and presence lost, all in the name of becoming better. The irony is clear. The pursuit of self-improvement, meant to enhance life, can actually diminish it when it is rooted in self-criticism rather than compassion. Relationships also suffer under this chase. When you demand constant improvement from yourself, you often project the same demand onto others. Friends, partners, or colleagues may feel judged or inadequate because you measure them against ideals just as you do yourself. This dynamic erodes intimacy because connection requires acceptance. The relentless push for better creates pressure where gentleness should live. Spiritual practice is not immune. Many seekers treat meditation or mindfulness as tools to fix themselves. They measure sessions by depth, by calmness, by insight, turning practice into another performance. But authentic practice is not about improvement. It is about presence. When the path is hijacked by striving, the peace it offers slips further away. The subtle chase of self-improvement has replaced the very freedom the practice was meant to reveal. The way out of this cycle begins with compassion. Compassion shifts the energy of growth from rejection to care. Instead of saying, "I must change because I am not enough," compassion says, "I grow because I care for myself." This small but profound shift transforms the texture of self-improvement. Growth becomes a gift rather than a demand, an act of love rather than fear. Compassion also allows you to rest. In the chase, rest feels like failure because every pause delays progress. But through compassion, rest is seen as part of growth. Just as muscles need recovery after exertion, the heart and mind need stillness to integrate change. Without compassion, rest is denied. With compassion, rest becomes sacred. Another essential practice is self-acceptance in the present. Accepting yourself now does not mean refusing to grow. It means recognizing that worthiness is not conditional on change. From this foundation, growth becomes free. You can pursue skills, healing, or wisdom without the weight of needing them to justify your existence. Paradoxically, genuine growth often accelerates when it is no longer pursued desperately. Gratitude also interrupts the chase. By appreciating how far you have already come, you weaken the belief that nothing is ever enough. Gratitude grounds you in presence, highlighting strengths and blessings overlooked by the restless drive for more. This perspective does not block progress. It makes it more sustainable because it removes the constant sting of inadequacy. Awareness of motivation is another key. Before pursuing improvement, ask, is this choice rooted in joy or in fear? Does it come from curiosity or from shame? By examining your intentions, you prevent unconscious chasing from driving your actions. If the answer is fear, pause. Redirect energy toward practices that nourish rather than punish. The body reveals the truth of your approach. When growth is driven by fear, the body feels tight, anxious, pressured. When growth is rooted in compassion, the body feels lighter, calmer, and more energized. By tuning into these signals, you learn to distinguish between chasing and genuine development. The body becomes a teacher, guiding you toward alignment. Community can also support this shift. Surrounding yourself with people who value presence over perfection helps dismantle the myth of constant improvement. In such environments, mistakes are seen as learning, rest is honored, and authenticity is valued above image. This atmosphere weakens the pull of the chase and nurtures sustainable growth. Letting go of the subtle chase of self-improvement does not mean abandoning growth. It means transforming it. Growth becomes a spiral rather than a ladder, an ongoing unfolding, not a desperate climb. There is no final version of yourself to reach. There is only the living process of becoming, guided by compassion and grounded in presence. The joy of this approach is that happiness is no longer postponed. You do not wait until you are more disciplined, more confident, more healed to allow joy. You honor joy now, even as you grow. This balance dissolves the illusion that you must earn happiness through endless effort. Growth and contentment coexist, feeding each other rather than competing. When growth is freed from chasing, it becomes playful again. Learning, healing, and evolving carry curiosity and lightness. Setbacks become part of the dance rather than evidence of failure. Each step is valuable, not because it brings you closer to perfection, but because it is part of living fully. The subtle chase of self-improvement is perhaps the hardest to see because it hides beneath noble intentions. But once revealed, it can be transformed into a path of compassion, presence, and joy. Growth is no longer about fixing what is broken, but about nurturing what is already whole. And in that shift, happiness stops being a goal at the end of the journey and becomes the companion walking beside you every step of the way. Happiness was never hiding in the next achievement, the next identity, or the next milestone. It was never waiting at the end of desire, at the finish line of busyness, or in the approval of others. Through these lessons, Buddhism shows us that the chase itself is what blinds us. When we loosen our grip, when we let go of comparison, when we stop bargaining with reality, when we allow ourselves to be unfinished, something extraordinary happens. The ordinary becomes sacred, stillness becomes nourishing, and life itself reveals its fullness. Peace does not come from running harder. It comes from stepping out of the race. Joy is not something to conquer, but something that arrives quietly when chasing ends. The moment you stop trying to control, prove, or strive your way into happiness, you discover it has been waiting for you all along. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What was the one insight from these teachings that struck you the most? Share it in the comments below. Your reflection might be the spark that helps someone else on their journey. And if you want more wisdom like this, practical, grounding, and freeing, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss the next step toward inner peace.